if a small group of secretive people manipulate and control one of the two great parties in Great Britain, what will they do when they have control of MI5, when they have control of all the levers of the state? Are they suddenly going to believe in justice, in proper investigations, in fairness? Or are they going to be the same as they are now, or even worse?
Al Jazeera has obtained the largest leak of documents in British political history.
Oh my God, this is unbelievable. It is absolutely shocking.
Hundreds of thousands of internal communications expose how operatives secretly take control of Britain's Labour Party.
The Labour Party is a criminal conspiracy against its members.
Free speech was shut down.
They tell the inside story of how Sir Keir Starmer, who could be Britain's next Prime Minister, leads a lawless party.
I've waited 17 months to appear in front of you in this hall as leader of our great party.
Confidential documents expose tactics to discredit and expel rivals in the party.
People are actually quite dangerous who are in the Labour Party. They were playing with people's lives here.
They reveal how Starmer's predecessor was undermined by a smear campaign from within.
It disabled him as a politician and as a potential Prime Minister.
Really nice to see you here. Bye.
How British democracy, known as the Mother of Parliaments, is being undermined by spying and dirty tricks.
No one would expect that a political party would associate themselves with a whole-scale hacking of the press.
It looks like somebody is constantly monitoring me, where I'm going and where my car is parked and where my children is going.
It just stinks to high heaven what they're doing in the background.
We speak to people whose voices have been silenced, including those who support Palestinian rights.
It's very painful. As Palestinians, there was no room for us to enter this debate, and that's how it was designed to be.
And the files reveal how a hierarchy of racism exists under Starmer's leadership.
I face more racism in the Labour Party than I have in the rest of my life combined.
In episode 1 of The Labour Files.
They don't care about the truth. They want control.
How unelected party officials suspend and expel opponents in the party.
They were sabotaging the democratic will of the party.
People will be absolutely furious when this gets out into the public domain. I love the city of Liverpool. Even though we've not been as rich as other cities financially, we've been very rich in terms of our perceptions of each other and our aspirations for a city that is fair and equal and democratic.
Anna Rothery is active in local politics. She has represented Labour, one of the two parties of government in Britain.
Thousands of trade unionists surged to mass
Nice attackers.
Liverpool is a bastion of Labour, a party born from trade unions and the working class. The city stands in contrast to southern counties of England, which overwhelmingly favour the right-wing Conservative Party.
I think we're always known as a fight.
Don't forget London. London supports Labour. Basically nowhere else in the south does, but London definitely does.
You know, we are very steadfast in terms of fighting against injustice. We don't quit. We continue to fight until we see the movement that we need to see.
Build bridges, not walls.
In 2015, Labour Party members across Britain elect a new leader. He has a radical vision that challenges Britain's establishment.
The wonderful campaign that I was involved with, and I was so proud to lead, brought a lot of people back into politics because they believed there was something on offer for them.
Membership of the Labour Party doubles. The files tell the story of how the hopes of many new party supporters are crushed. How established politicians and party bureaucrats use the media to destroy a movement that sought to change British society.
It's no secret that quite... And so they...
Giga Chad. We do love Peter.
It is obviously a very disappointing night for election campaign.
The Labour file 4 years earlier, he has his own office, whose illegal unit then headed by John.
From the moment Jeremy Corbyn was elected, he faced
headquarters is at a central London building.
Strategy from that which the leader.
In Liverpool, the files tell the story of a city deprived of its voice.
They closed ranks and went, we don't want anybody who's got an ounce of time for Jeremy Corbyn.
The Labour files show how, behind the scenes, party bureaucrats prevent Rothery seeking higher office.
She has a Jekyll and Hyde character, someone who can be quite rational, and then in seconds turns into a screaming banshee. It's a vile comment to make. Such a horrible comment to make about a woman. You know, a screaming banshee. When you get to the
That's talking about kind of the WhatsApp chats where they were pretty abusive.
like this, can predetermine the direction of travel of an entire movement. We're in, uncharted waters.
It's a story that starts across the Mersey River in the summer of 2016.
The Wallasey Labour Party was a really friendly organisation. There was no hostility, no arguments. There was the occasional debate about things where we differ.
But there is a mood of crisis in the party.
Jeremy Corbyn's Labour leadership is in crisis as he loses 9
I told Jeremy Corbyn last night that I no longer had confidence.
The Labour Party is in turmoil with members of his shadow cabinet.
I just feel the party needs leadership and direction.
It's been a disastrous weekend for the Labour Party. There have been mass resignations by 11 shadow ministers.
Please, for the sake of our party, leave.
He now needs to step aside.
It becomes known as the chicken coup. In Wallasey, Labour Party members hold their annual meeting. A year earlier, they had nominated Corbyn as party leader. The Member of Parliament for Wallasey is Angela Eagle.
Fingers crossed we get the stream actually working, which is very frustrating, but hey-ho.
Is unable to attend the meeting.
NB Alters, thank you for the follow. Welcome to the Justice stream.
Our MP, Angela Eagle, had been very supportive of Jeremy in the meetings where she would come along to constituency meetings and give a report about what had been going on.
According to Runswick, the meeting ends without incident. A week later, a prominent opponent to Corbyn claims that Eagle, who is openly lesbian, is the victim of abuse.
I got a phone call saying that there was a television programme where Tessa Jowell was saying that Angela had been subject to homophobic abuse at the meeting.
I mean, I talked to Angela about her meeting. She faced homophobic abuse at that meeting.
Angela wasn't at the meeting, but the inference was that she was. She wasn't.
Activists and members of parliament and their staff are facing day in, day out harassment and, in some cases, intimidation.
I rang other people who were at the meeting. It was just a complete shock. We didn't know anything about it.
No one heard this, The sort of people you don't use language like that.
There was no homophobia or intimidation at the meeting. It's a very small room, so it would be very easy to hear what was being said by other people.
The national media seize on the story.
There was articles and television interviews saying that there'd been people shouting that Angela was a dyke, that there was homophobic gestures made, and repeated homophobic comments. Then over the days and weeks to follow, the allegations grew into, first of all, it was widespread homophobia.
What happened in Wallasey is to become the playbook of Corbyn's opponents in the party. The Labour files reveal the series of complaints filed by Eagle supporters to the party.
Limp wrist gestures were made at our LGBT officer, and nasty homophobic comments were made about our MP.
I did not see any limp wrist gestures, and there were no homophobic comments made about the MP.
I had no homophobic.
To be fair, this is all just kind of your word against mine, right? I guess I can't really take it as read. You have to kind of take it as read, unfortunately. Whereas obviously there are later things that come up where they actually do have proof that that things were entirely fabricated.
I don't know anyone who did, and there was no other abuse.
I've never seen such tosh in all my life.
The room was full of trade unionists who are well aware that their jobs were on the line if any slurs about homophobia or misogyny were found to be true. I just was stunned.
It didn't happen. And yes, I did repeatedly say that these things didn't happen because they didn't. As simple as that. And I'll say that forever.
My daughter got married the day after the meeting, and she married a woman. I wasn't alone on the top table with a relative who identifies as bisexual. So it just seems strange that anybody would think that we would allow that to go on.
And here you have people who seem palpably decent, men and women. In order to damage the local Labour Party, a real horrible hatchet job is being done on the local members.
Eagle then reveals her intent.
Well, Streamlabs doesn't give me notifications of the stream crashing, so at the very least, hopefully we'll be getting better coverage moving forward.
Not to support Corbyn, but to challenge him.
Today, I'm announcing my decision to stand for the leadership of the Labour Party.
There needed to be a distraction from the fact that Wallasey constituency were not supporting their MP's leadership bid.
Angela Eagle and her staff started to become paranoid that she was going to be deselected, as in that her local members would say, well, we don't want you to be our MP next time there's a general election. And so that was something which they were very animated about.
I'm looking forward to having a debate with Jeremy Corbyn about the things that really matter to our country.
A councillor, Paul Stewart, compiles a dossier of complaints from 17 people claiming they heard homophobic comments.
It must have been said very loudly. Now, those 17 people heard it, other people in the room would also have heard it. But didn't hear it because it wasn't said.
Stewart sends the dossier to party headquarters.
Oh, we excellent. Got the Kevin Logan gifts. Excellent. Love to see it. Love to see it.
I have also attached a slip of paper that was handed to me previously by a Momentum member.
Momentum was an organisation set up in 2015 to give some kind of organisational form to the movement that supported Jeremy Corbyn.
Stewart claims the note is evidence of a plot by Momentum.
How to take control of Labour Party meetings.
It's not the kind of note that I've ever seen anyone circulating seriously. This is a note caricaturing what the militant tendency was accused of doing in the 1980s.
At this year's Labour conference, militants and its supporters seem to have had as high a profile as ever.
The militant tendency was a radical left faction that was accused of secretly plotting to take...
Yeah, 100%. Like, trying to say that somehow that there's this kind of this Labour position against like anti-LGBT sentiment. Yeah, Rosie Duffield's just allowed to just sit there and no one cares. We're not even allowed to question it, right?
Take over the Labour Party. At that time, it controlled Liverpool's local government.
For the right of the Labour Party, the battle against militant in the 1980s is kind of biblical. It's the foundation of their politics.
A think tank from the right of the party publishes a review of a book about the militant tendency. It claims to describe militant strategy for taking over party meetings in the 1980s. The note from Councillor Stewart is copied directly from the book review.
I don't know if somebody has passed a note like that. I don't know. They're totally bonkers if they have. I find it hard to believe that a document like that would be passed around that I wouldn't have got to hear about personally.
Some people have said Tom Watson's there, he knows.
Tom Watson, Corbyn's deputy, but privately a critic, obtained Stewart's note.
Oh, I fucking hate Tom Watson. He's such a piece of shit.
Watson then writes to Corbyn.
There is no denying that tightly organised factions are organising within Momentum and the party.
At the end of Watson's letter, he says,
I attach a document that I am reliably informed is being shared between Momentum members with links to far-left parties, which summarises the methods used by militant in the 1980s.
But it was, to my mind, wasn't Momentum mostly just a group of people who had never really been in politics previously? Was there? I mean, I don't know. I've never been a member of Momentum, so I couldn't really comment on their actual organisational structure, whether they did have these links or not.
I hope this note helps to dispel any remaining notion that entryism is a conspiracy theory.
Paul Stewart's note ends up in the national media.
As Tom Watson says, are you allowing Trotskyists and the hard left to infiltrate Labour?
This is how facts are created in the political media space. You have something which is reportable and it can always be referred back to, and it becomes one of these facts, which of course isn't a fact. And that's how a large number of these stories come about.
I think the British media has a lot to answer for, including me. I remember reading this and thinking...
I'm glad Peter Oborne is one of the people who does actually... he actually critiques the media paradigm in this country. Again, Peter Oborne is the guy who used to be political editor of The Telegraph and has also been doing political journalism for the Mail as well. And he himself sees fit to critique the media landscape of the UK and how kind of incestuous and inbred their coverage and their ideological kind of leanings are.
Yeah, well, that's some of the Corbyn supporters are a rotten lot. The media should have done what the media is supposed to do, which is to question the official versions of the truth, or the Labour Party version of the truth, and gone and say, is it really what was really going on?
The files reveal that Angela Eagle colluded with party bureaucrats in Labour's London headquarters. Stuart writes to senior party official Emily Oldknow.
I think that the constituents...
Like, Emily Oldknow's working at Unison now. What a scab union. Somebody tried to bring down the Labour movement, and now she's working in a top position in our unions, right? Pathetic.
The Labour Party is out of control and should be suspended with immediate effect.
Oldknow forwards the message to Ian McNichol, the party's general secretary.
Obviously, anything would have to be agreed with Angela.
McNichol responds.
She is happy for constituency Labour Party to be suspended, and so am I.
Oldknow emails back.
We have to do what Angela wants in these circumstances.
Now, that's new to me because up until now, I've always said that I could never prove that Angela was involved in any of this, because I couldn't.
Southside suspends Wallasey Labour Party. They are banned from holding official meetings. Paul Davies organises a public meeting.
This is your chance to find out what is really going on in Wallasey Labour Party, and your chance to have your say.
Allies of Paul Stewart complain to party bureaucrats that Davies delivered the flyers only to the homes of party members.
I witnessed Paul Davies posting the flyer through our letterboxes. No one else in our close received this flyer.
Stewart claims Davies has illegally obtained party membership data.
I am aghast that such clear data protection has been breached, yet nothing seems to have been done about this.
Stewart demands that Davies is expelled from the party and reported to the police.
The police and/or the Information Commissioner's Office should be informed of this clear breach of data.
But Davies was not in Wallasey on the day they claim.
I was in London, which is unusual. I don't go to London very often. I've gone to see a show, if I remember rightly. But if I hadn't been in London, if I hadn't had train tickets, if I hadn't had credit cards, I would have been expelled from the Labour Party because some people got together and decided that'd be a good way to get rid of me.
A party official emails a colleague who handles investigations.
Well, if he wasn't even in town, a bit lucky we didn't suspend him.
Well, I like him. He's got a sense of humour. It's a bit lucky they didn't suspend me. If that had been me, I'd have been saying, well, how did this happen? Well, they know how it happened. They know that people are getting together to construct evidence against little old me.
She's Jonathan Ashworth's partner. Fucking hell, of course she is.
Metadata from the files reveals who wrote the complaints against Davies.
Right, so if you've got the original email or document, you can get to who authored it. And the author is the email address of Paul Stewart because I've emailed him. So Paul Stewart wrote that document for one at least of his relatives and friends to sign.
Davies dares the accusers to take a lie detector test in front of journalists. Party headquarters suspends him from the Labour Party for 2 years. John Stolliday leads the legal department. Reporting to him is the head of disputes, Sam Matthews.
Oh, that man's name makes me angry. Fuck Sam Matthews.
He's charged with investigating the alleged homophobic comments. Only 4 of the original 17 complainants heard any.
4 people explicitly claim to have heard the Dyke comment. 3 of those 4 people have the same surname. I interviewed one of them, and I firmly believe his account.
The common surname is Stewart. The party's official report on Wallasey claims that Eagle
received many hundreds of abusive, homophobic and frightening messages sent by Labour members.
The files show that, despite this claim, no Labour Party members are suspended for homophobic behaviour. But Matthews keeps the constituency party suspended for over a year. He emails Oldknow.
I have every sympathy for the fact that Angela is still in a difficult situation as they are properly organised in her constituency.
Matthews also recognises that Wallasey's membership supports Corbyn and not Angela Eagle.
My worry is that based on track record, no matter how much time we give Angela to organise, so little work will go into it that we'll end up getting asked to extend it further and further.
So we have no democracy. If you have an inner core of 6, 8 or 10 people nationally with the tentacles spreading out to various regions, saying who can be a candidate, saying who can be a member, then you control the body politic of one of the major parties in this country. And I find that is undemocratic. Basically, it's a coup by a group of people to take over one of the major political parties in Britain.
Yep,
Brighton is a progressive city in the UK. It's kind of known for being progressive. It's known for being kind of liberal, left-leaning. And obviously the movement behind Jeremy Corbyn was very strong in Brighton and actually in other places on the south coast.
The local branch becomes the largest in the country with over 6,000 members. The party organises its first general meeting since Corbyn became leader.
The atmosphere in the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn was one of optimism, was one of cheer, was one of solidarity. We organised a rally before the annual meeting of the City Party. Anyone was invited, and we had about 700-800 people there.
A week before the meeting, the leader of the Labour group in the Brighton City Council sends an email to his supporters.
I'm emailing to ask you a favour. Next Saturday, our City Labour Party faces a takeover by a group of individuals from Momentum and other fringe left-wing groups. This party has faced down militant before. I'm asking you to help do that again.
I was a member
But there's this weird way in which that they're somehow trying to claim that Momentum are anyway similar to Militant, whereas Militant was actually explicitly a group of just actual, quote-unquote trusts. This crazy notion that, Corbyn's politics was somehow essentially like a nouveau Bolshevik rather than just social democrat. It's crazy shit.
Momentum at that time, and we decided we would run a left slate, which we did.
Is it Zoe Wanamaker? Really? I had no idea.
We went into that meeting open.
It sounded like Tamsin Gregg to me.
Honest, transparent, to make speeches, and when we were elected, we were very pleased.
We all had 65% of the vote. 2 in 3 people attending it, a record turnout, a record majority, had won.
How do you know?
But actually, in retrospect, we went into that meeting like lambs to the slaughter. We had no idea of the level of corruption and conspiracy and lies and abuse that would follow as a consequence of a democratic election within Brighton.
And then I got a call. About 10:30, I think, that night. I was just outside the theatre. It was a call from someone in Jeremy Corbyn's office, someone I knew. And she said, I thought she was ringing to congratulate me, as I got text and phone calls. But no, she rang me and said, yes, we've got to do something about spitting. We've got to be able to rebut the spitting. I said, what? What spitting?
The following day, Morgan sends a complaint to Labour's regional office.
Venue staff were allegedly spat at. Others were verbally intimidated. Our organiser was assaulted and abused. I've no hesitation in saying that this is a hostile takeover of the party.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely something that no people on the Labour right would ever do. That's never a thing the Labour right have ever done.
These fake accusations were shooting around the world before truth gets its boots on. It took me 48 hours to piece together what anybody could have pieced together. And that is, lies had been told. They'd been told repeatedly. Over 2 or 3 days, with repeated opportunities, they lied. They lied, lied, and lied again. I took 78 statements, 23,000 words, named people who attended, and every single person said there was nothing wrong. When I got the CCTV footage proving there was no spitting, the allegations disappeared.
Oh, geez, the CCTV footage. Okay, well, that actual claims where things were just fabricated, that's what we want to see.
Despite having no evidence that spitting or aggression took place, the files show that Labour's legal unit is intent on overturning the victory of the pro-Corbyn faction. Catherine Buckingham from the Disputes Unit writes to her boss.
What's your feeling on Brighton?
The head of the legal unit replies.
Exactly what you proposed. Overturn the annual general meeting, deal with individuals, while we worry about applying the rules correctly and legal niceties.
Buckingham feels confident that the rules don't matter.
It's all about to come to a head. I'm not worried about any of those things. I say act now and worry about those things later.
Days later, the results of the election are overturned and the constituency is suspended.
The biggest mistake I've made, apart from joining the Labour Party in the first place, was winning an election in the Labour Party, and they can't stand that.
And they just they just hate democracy. Like it's just they do not. I mean, to be fair, as I've said plenty of times on the stream, loads of people just within UK politics or within the UK in general, they just do not have any axiomatic belief in the efficacy of democracy. They just don't care. All it is power.
In a residential suburb of London, Labour Party members meet to discuss the role of their local MP in the so-called chicken coup against Corbyn.
Feelings were running quite high because there was a perception that the MP in Harrow West, Gareth Thomas, had been very unsupportive towards Jeremy Corbyn, the leader, and had resigned from the shadow cabinet. And there was a motion that they criticised Gareth Thomas for this. And various people spoke in favour of it. But I actually spoke against it because I didn't think it'd be that helpful.
Pamela Fitzpatrick says the mood suddenly turned sour.
Michael Borio, who was a councillor, became very agitated and stood up and started shouting primarily at me, and was very aggressive. I didn't respond. I continued to respond to the chair, and I remained calm throughout that time. And the meeting ended, and that was that, really.
Fitzpatrick is suspended from the Labour Party. No reason is given.
That'll be all the trot hunting that we were told they did in the Ford report, right? Like, the evidence is just so damning and no one in the UK media bothers talking about it. Like, we have the leaked report, we have this, and we also have the Ford report. And the Ford report is explicit in that people within the party apparatus were explicitly using their power to try and excise members of the left.
I was really, really upset, in tears a lot of the time, actually, over this.
The files reveal that a complaint made by Michael Borio led to Fitzpatrick's suspension.
So I've got an email here from Councillor Michael Borio. I haven't seen this before. None of this I've actually said, which is quite shocking. At a meeting where Michael Borio was aggressive and shouting at me, and at which I've not responded, he's actually twisted it so that I'm the aggressor shouting at him and being rude at him.
I was shouted down and heckled by Councillor Fitzpatrick. We should listen to others with respect and not heckle, abuse, bully or attack our fellow Labour colleagues.
It is completely fabricated. So how is that a fair process? It's astonishing that a party that calls itself a democratic party would behave like this.
The branch chair compares the methods used to suspend Fitzpatrick to those of Soviet spies.
The suspensions were done in a draconian and secretive way, which owed more to the style of the KGB than the Labour Party.
Keith Stalin, am I right, guys?
Was really, really
I'll shut up now.
affected by it, actually, and had started to suffer with depression and anxiety about going to meetings. That was the first time I started to worry that when I went to meetings I was going to be attacked.
The files reveal the role of local Labour MP Gareth Thomas in expelling members of his own party. Thomas sends a letter to General Secretary Ian McNichol asking for pro-Corbyn activists in Harrow to be treated more harshly. Thomas proposes
Reviewing the disciplinary procedures. I am concerned that the party has decided to rescind their suspensions and allow them to continue their infiltration activities into Harrow West.
The London regional organiser writes to Head of Disputes Sam Matthews.
Regarding Pamela Fitzpatrick, Gareth is getting very worried about it all and wants to come in to have a chat about it.
Gareth is chasing via Ian's office.
This email confirms that Gareth was behind all of this, including me. He publicly will say that he's very supportive of me. He's actually written, whilst he was planning to get rid of me, he's written letters in support of me that he'll send to local people to tell them that he's actually supporting me.
The files reveal that a number of MPs are involved in the purging of members of their own constituency party. The MP for Hove is Peter Kyle. He sends an email to the governance and legal unit.
Rebecca Massey, I would like to direct you in the strongest terms to investigate and to remove the member from the party. You will see a pattern of behaviour online which is also replicated in person. She is regularly aggressive.
Well, that's the whole hierarchy of racism that we've been hearing about Majima Madness, right? I mean, the amount of time, again, that's the issue, is that it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? By claiming that there was this, anti-Semitism problem, despite there being despite the fact that any problems relating to anti-Semitism or a party problem relating to anti-Semitism was over-exaggerated specifically to smear Corbyn and the left explicitly, right? they had to spend so much time dealing with anti-Semitism cases to try and expedite them to make sure that any perceived wrongdoing was punished correctly. It meant that they didn't have any other time to be able to deal with new complaints of Islamophobia. And then also people like Ian McNicol just didn't care. They didn't care about whether these claims were being investigated in earnest or not. They just cared about expelling the faction that they didn't like.
Aggressive to my staff and myself at meetings.
Not least Islamophobia against an MP, but also Islamophobia against an MP who's currently off sick because of domestic abuse.
I think it's very important that abusive and uncomradely behaviour is dealt with by the party.
It's astonishing that at that time, an MP would be making those assertions in order to get me expelled from the Labour Party. A man, I will say, I've had in my own house for meetings. I'm not an aggressive person.
Rebecca Massey avoids disciplinary measures and is elected as chair of a local branch. A former MP, Ivor Kaplan, is in the same branch. He complains to the regional office.
I must immediately request that this person's membership is suspended and subject to further investigation.
Kaplan sends a link to an article by a group known as the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Massey's tweets describe her view of the influence of the pro-Israel lobby in Britain. The article states that Massey is
dedicated to the demonization of Israel.
It also alleges that a problem of
Is Campaign Against Anti-Semitism the one that does the weird tweets? Or am I thinking of a different one? Well, and I'm thinking of Stop Anti-Semitism, actually, sorry.
Anti-Semitism in the
Ignore
Labour
me.
Party rests.
Squarely in the black hearts of individuals like her.
There was a whole article about how I was an anti-Semite. I began to be traduced.
February the 3rd, 2017 was the day that anti-Semitism was used for the first time in Brighton and Hove as a weapon against pro-Corbyn candidates. Because it was on the 3rd of February that the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism published a shocking article about Becky, immediately amplified, retweeted, and drawn to the attention of media.
From that initial one story, there have been 6 years of abuse following, always referring back to that initial story. And that's gone on for six years now.
A month earlier, Al Jazeera broadcast an investigation into Israel's attempts to influence British politics.
Using an undercover reporter, Al Jazeera's investigative unit exposes Israel's clandestine activities in London, a city that's become a major battleground. One of Israel's main
No, it wasn't just 6 puppies, it was 6 kittens as well, JDM. It's even worse than you think of all the terrible things that Jimberly Crumbles did.
targets is the Labour Party. For the first time, its leader is a champion of Palestinian civil rights.
I'd be very happy to see Jeremy Corbyn no longer leader of the Labour Party, for sure.
It's a covert action that penetrates the heart of Britain's democracy.
A senior political officer at the Israeli embassy discusses with a British civil servant how to deal with MPs who were critical of Israel.
Can I give you some MPs that suggest you take down?
The investigation forces the Israeli...
But they even got footage of it as well, jeez. Doing good investigative reporting there. Actually, the channels go a little bit deeper than you expect, actually. Peter Oborne did a really good expose of it for Middle East Eye. It's worth reading.
The ambassador to apologise to the British government, and the diplomat is sent home.
The diplomat in question no longer seems to be a functionary of the embassy in London. And so whatever he may exactly have been doing here, his cover can be said to have been well and truly blown.
The undercover operation also shows how a former employee at the Israeli embassy becomes leader of the Jewish labour movement.
Hi guys, so I've been introduced. I'm Ella, I am JLM's barbecuer-in-chief and new director. Probably hire someone political who actually knows, what they're doing. Before that, I was at the embassy working with Shai. I don't know where they belong.
Shai is the name of the disgraced Israeli operative. Ella Rose discusses methods she favours to deal with rivals within the party. Jackie Walker is a pro-Corbyn activist who supports civil rights for Palestinians.
I saw Jackie Walker on Saturday and thought, you know what, I can take her. She's like 5'2" and tiny. I'm very over them and their existence. As far as I'm concerned, they can go blind.
Well,
It's interesting to see that again, because obviously I have seen it before. And just the sort of smugness of the woman.
Naomi, we stan.
Talking about not only a fellow Jew and a fellow Labour Party member, as Jackie says, but a woman. It's extraordinary.
Naomi Wimborne Idrisi is one of several party members who complain.
So a few of us women in the Labour Party who were Jewish got together and we sent in an official complaint. And we wrote to Ian McNicol, who was General Secretary at the time, and we said, obviously it's completely inappropriate for a Labour Party member to be talking about another
The fact that she's been suspended from the NEC as well, like literally that she got elected, like was it a week and a half ago or some shit like that, and then immediately they try and remove her because they just cannot contemplate the idea of a plurality of ideas
in this way. What did he intend to do about it?
The Labour files reveal that party officials treat Rose very differently to members who criticise Israel. Rose emails Sam Matthews, the then head of disputes.
I would very much like to volunteer to come and meet with you and all relevant members of the disputes team next week in order to clear this matter up at the earliest opportunity.
4 days later, Rose meets Matthews.
Had I known that our private meeting had been covertly recorded with the intention to broadcast our conversation on an international network, I would have never made those comments.
Days later, Matthews writes to Rose.
Yeah, I only said them because I thought no one was listening.
At interview, you said that you understood the language you used was ugly, and in retrospect, you wished you had not used those words. You noted that there isn't, nor will there ever be, any public record of you using such language. For the reasons outlined above, the Labour Party will be taking no further action on this matter.
Within a few days, I got an email back saying thank you very much. I've looked into this. We've reminded Miss Rose of the conduct expected of members of the Labour Party. Case closed. Goodbye.
The files include Wimborne Idrisi's email asking the General Secretary to bring the decision on Rose before the party's governing body, the NEC.
We are disappointed to have received no response to our email calling for a review of Ian McNicol's judgment on our complaint against Ella Rose. We look forward to hearing what the NEC plans to do to correct the current unsatisfactory situation.
So McNichol's immediate response is to mail Stoliday, Matthews and Old Now saying Happy Friday. Nice.
Well, that was all in the Chakrabarti report, right? All of the stuff between Old Now and McNicol and the actual conspiracy that they engaged in.
And then Stoliday gets back to him, Matthews and Old Now. Don't think it needs a response. We said clearly matter is closed.
The Labour movement stands for decency and fairness. And looking at the Ella Rose disciplinary case, it's sort of chummy. This very rapid exchange of emails, the personal meeting, the declaration that the case is closed.
Rose's case will not be discussed by the National Executive Committee because Stoliday, the head of the party's legal unit, ensures it is dealt with secretly. A day after Matthews clears Rose, Stoliday sends an email to fellow official Odno. He briefed an official on the NEC.
She is fine, says important that we deal with it informally and don't take it to NEC where everyone will get worked up.
Yeah, we're dealing with it informally because if it actually goes down the official channels, an outcome might come out of it that we don't like.
Matthew tells members of the NEC that Rose's case has been handled according to standard procedure.
Officers applied, I think I'm going to have a giggle here. Officers applied exactly the same standards as they do for all investigations when deciding the most proportionate recommendation to make. Sorry. That's hilarious, really, isn't it? Never mind.
It looks like an example of abuse, and it's sort of thing that ought to have gone to the NEC.
As far as I'm concerned, they can go blind.
It looks like there's a set of double standards going on here, that Ella Rose is being treated in a different way.
Like this, what's interesting, actually, when you look at we think of it, it's like we've all said shit like that about people that we don't like, right? Yeah, absolutely fine. But the fact that the issue really isn't, like, the statements that she made in specific, it's the fact that no action was properly taken against them, other than just an informal chat with the people who she's chatting with on the complaints board.
After abusive behaviour, which she acknowledges, than people in Brighton and in Wallasey, etc.
In northwest London, Fitzpatrick's suspension is overturned, and she becomes Labour's parliamentary candidate in Harrow East. The constituency debates whether to affiliate to Jewish Voice for Labour, or JVL. JVL represents Jewish members who are critical towards the State of Israel. The Jewish Labour Movement, or JLM, supports Israel.
There was a debate, which was a very civilised debate. It was a very
What's frustrating as well is that it says, well, you do support Israel or you are critical. I mean, that's the issue is that people like JVL, like you can even support all the citizens of Israel and just be critical of the actions of the actual government of the State of Israel, right? Like, I mean, that's a position I think most people on the left hold. Like, regular citizens of Israel, like whatever, they don't do what people like Likud, or I guess now it's the coalition, would do. They just carry on with their lives like any other working people, right? It's the issues is the actions of the State of Israel. Problem is that liberals think that the state is just some kind of like actual physical manifestation of the will of the people, which is just isn't really. In all honesty, most people, they put their vote in and then they get on with their day. Obviously, there's a bunch of manufactured consent that goes into it as well, but saying just blanket support for Israel as if it's some kind of team sport rather than a complex political process where people make policy based upon the power that they have as the governing body of the state. It's really childish description.
They voted overwhelmingly to support Jewish Voice for Labour.
Fitzpatrick suddenly receives a flurry of aggressive tweets.
The next day, there were comments on social media attacking me for Harrow East having affiliated to Jewish Voice for Labour and asking me to condemn Jewish Voice for Labour. It just kept getting worse and worse. And then it was, well, your silence means, you support it. Your silence means you support Holocaust deniers. And then it turned into, you are a Holocaust denier.
One of the accounts attacking Fitzpatrick belongs to a Labour Party activist, Luke Stanger.
Councillor Fitzpatrick's selection has already caused a lot.
This Luke Stanger character, he's an absolute fucking weapon. My God, this guy was the one. I think he was the one who was essentially called like travellers, like subhuman.
To some in the Jewish community,
it's stirring things up and creating this perception that somehow I'm anti-Semitic. It's really upsetting for me. Really, really upsetting.
Stanger contacts an employee of Fitzpatrick's on Facebook.
I have been asked by a moderate councillor in Harrow to help build up a social media dossier on her, which can then be leaked out and will hopefully result in the suspension of her candidacy. She seems a nasty sectarian mouthpiece for the hard left.
Yeah, literally just, can we make up a dossier so that we can get rid of the person with the politics that we don't like?
He did some research and then found that there were other people that he attacked.
I'm one of many women who's been on the receiving end of Luke Stanger's abuse over the years. He started pretty much kind of constantly and relentlessly writing abusive tweets about me. He uses words like crazed, deranged, repellent, rancid, grandma, this kind of language. Now, this isn't the language of political discourse, and nobody could argue that it is. But that's the kind of language that Luke Stanger uses.
Come on, you Spurs! Happy day!
Luke Stanger then became associated with a group called Sussex Friends of Israel. And Luke Stanger would appear with some of the characters from Sussex Friends of Israel, where there were pro-Palestinian stalls or leafleting. Luke Stanger would appear and he would walk around, filming.
He's one of those people that just seems to be able to act with impunity, that whatever...
There was a little section about a previous Al Jazeera expose of like Israel's ties into political activism in the UK, but it wasn't a particularly long segment, JDM. Like, it essentially was that there was a guy from the Israeli embassy who was a little bit corrupt and then who got sacked. That's the only real thing that we've had so far about quote unquote the Israel lobby. They've not even used the word lobby. Like, and there were some receipts there too. Like, this was a guy who was disgraced and was excised from the embassy itself too. So it's not the Jewish conspiracy theory type stuff, which is refreshing because I hate it when that shit happens.
whatever he does is going to be acceptable to party officials. And you can't help being suspicious, really, about, who's backing him, who's supporting him. How does he manage to continue in the way he does?
After multiple complaints are filed, the Labour Party suspends Stanger. The party sends Stanger a questionnaire inviting him to respond to the allegations. Stanger rejects the accusation that he has broken any of the party's rules or codes of conduct. Metadata in the Labour files reveals that Stanger didn't write the letter himself.
Okay.
How would the metadata reveal that? I don't understand that stuff.
Okay. So this shows that the author of what I've been looking at by Luke Stanger is another.
I think most of the documentary that I've seen, or the clips that I've seen, JDM, is mostly centered around the complaints process and the essentially the kind of coterie of people at the top of the party who abuse their positions to be able to excise people they dislike.
Another Luke Akehurst.
Oh, not Luke Akehurst. Call him by his real name, which is Nuke Akehurst.
Akehurst is an influential figure in the Labour Party and now sits on the party's National Executive Committee. He's also a key figure in the pro-Israel lobby, a director of We Believe in Israel.
Oh my word. So the author of those documents, surprise, surprise, is Luke Akehurst.
Luke Akehurst is known to be the anti-Corbynista of all anti-Corbynistas.
What this makes me feel is I had the sense all along that this was organised. Now, Luke Akehurst is behaving like this. It's quite shocking, really.
We've always had a diverse mix of communities in Liverpool. The proudest thing I would say is that I've made politics accessible to people. I've shown them that, you can represent communities. It was about making sure that we did have the political representation and have a say on how the city was run.
The Labour files reveal how Keir Starmer's enforcers take control of the selection of the party's candidates.
One of those men arrested is the mayor of Liverpool.
On suspicion of conspiracy to commit bribery and witness intimidation.
When Liverpool's mayor is arrested...
Okay, JDM, cool.
It sparks a new selection process for the party's candidate in the upcoming election for mayor. Anna Rothery seeks the party's nomination.
I believe real change comes from the ground up, not the top down. And it's on that basis that I ask for your support.
A panel of party representatives interview Rothery. She is selected with 2 other candidates for a vote by Labour members in Liverpool.
I was very surprised in terms of the way people rallied round to support me.
Rothery was backed by one of Britain's largest trade unions.
I was endorsed by United. I was also endorsed by many MPs. I was also endorsed by Jeremy Corbyn.
I'm absolutely delighted to support Anna Rothery as our candidate to be Liverpool's mayor.
Just Scousers just make me happy. They're just the best people in the country, and it's not even close.
Great to have, those endorsements by public figures, but the most meaningful endorsements came from the people of Liverpool. As far as I was aware, it was then down to the people of Liverpool to choose who they wanted to be their candidate.
Former leader Jeremy Corbyn is one of the latest victims of the purge against the left of the party. He was suspended from the party's ranks in Parliament.
Will you be restoring the whip?
Put a statement out last night, thank you.
In Britain, it is called having the whip removed.
Thank you very much for coming.
Rothery speaks out against the party's treatment of Corbyn.
I'd like to see the whip restored to Jeremy and the constituency Labour Party officers who have faced arbitrary suspension to be reinstated.
Rothery's statement lands in the inbox of senior officials at party headquarters.
One of our Liverpool candidates. Not ideal.
A fellow Labour councillor in Liverpool also emails London headquarters.
Anna continued to call for the restoration of the whip to Jeremy.
Wait, Puke Snakehurst also works as well. Either one, Puke, Nukes, Spook Akehurst, I don't know. It's just a bad end. She called it Shit Hurst. There you go, that'll do.
Corbyn. This action has seen constituency Labour Party members suspended, but we're turning a blind eye to this?
Party officials in
Why would you? I don't know why. Why would it be a suspendable offence just to say that you think voicing an opinion on whether the fact that someone else was suspended?
Outside discuss dealing with Rothery.
Anything to do or see here?
I don't see anything that's really actionable in this.
They're obviously trying to filter for information that's going to be detrimental. It seems as though they're trying to discredit me as a viable candidate.
Then something unexpected happens.
The next thing I got, an email saying, we're going to have to hold off in terms of the elections. The panel want to invite the three candidates back to another interview. I didn't really understand what was behind it. I just thought it was just maybe they wanted to check some facts.
A letter arrives in the inbox of the new Labour Party General Secretary, David Evans. It comes from Alan Dean, a former Labour councillor in Liverpool.
Dear David, I've been asked to contact you in relation to Councillor Anna Rothery and her unsuitability to stand as Labour's candidate for the position of elected Mayor of Liverpool. I'm firmly of the opinion that she would be a disaster. A disaster for the city and the Labour
We don't get a choice about whether she's a disaster or not. There's democracy in it.
Party if she were to become the elected Mayor.
It went on.
Her sudden conversion to and support from various senior Corbynista MPs is of huge concern for the direction she would take.
Well, it's all beginning to slot into place. The more I'm reading, I'm thinking this was a concerted effort by very senior people to disparage, me as an individual.
The letter makes comments about Rothery's family.
I don't even want to repeat that. It's just so untrue. It's and it just tells me that he's such a vicious individual to bring people's children into something. This is really dirty business.
Dean's letter also raises an incident involving a fellow Labour councillor a decade earlier.
When the councillor, which was Nick Small, came to my table, I knew it was going to be nothing but trouble because Dave was being trouble. And I got to the point where I just avoided him. So he gradually worked his way round and he said, you only got that position because you're black. And I just ignored him.
A version of the row is leaked to a Liverpool newspaper, alleging that Rothery had prodded Nick Small on the head. A party officer conducts an internal...
A whole prod? A prod? What are we going to do? A prod?
Investigation.
I don't know what investigation he did, but I know what the outcome was that Nick Small apologised to me.
Dean's letter contains a condemnation of Rothery.
She has proven herself to be untrustworthy, dishonest person, someone who is solely motivated by her ego, status, and financial gain.
The Labour files do not establish who asked Dean to write the letter to the party General Secretary.
And it's obviously designed or orchestrated, to feed into something much bigger, out of my control in terms of what they're trying to do.
Rothery goes to her second interview with a selection panel, but this time it's very different.
I think I knew within the first couple of seconds that there was something not quite right about it, because the demeanour had changed in terms of the panel.
The encounter with Small is raised.
I was literally told by...
Also, I get that this isn't particularly riveting reaction content. I'm just basically sitting here watching it and making snarky comments over the top. But it's Al Jazeera. I'm sure the Qatari government wouldn't mind me borrowing their content.
One of the panel members that there'd been an incident in 2011 that would bring the party into disrepute because I'd slapped or punched or hit Nick Small. They felt that Nick Small had made a complaint against me, whereas when I said that I'd made it against him, they kind of looked a bit deflated, to say the least.
I was walking with my youngest boy to the nearby school. Near the school, I saw Luke Stanger.
Luke Stanger remains suspended while the party investigates his case.
He really does look like a fucking cue ball, doesn't he? I mean, it's bad, it's nasty of me to make fun of someone's appearance, but whatever. If you're a racist piece of shit, you deserve it.
According to his notice,
a suspended member shall not represent the party in any position at any level.
Social media posts show him campaigning for Labour MPs during the 2019 general election.
He saw me, I saw him. I didn't know him, I knew of him, and I didn't want to talk to him. Then I received a private message from Luke Stanger, which was a shock. It said something along the lines of, good to see you on the morning run with your son. So not unfriendly, but I didn't interpret it as a friendly act.
McCarthy is then accused of anti-Semitism.
I'm at home with my family, and I start seeing these things appearing on my phone about me being a vile anti-Semite. And completely disgraceful. And these vile, horrendous allegations are being made against me. I am not an anti-Semite. I absolutely detest that allegation. It is completely and utterly untruthful. I'm an anti-racist. I'm proud to be an anti-racist.
Stanger increases the intimidation.
Should go full Hassan. Leave the chair. There you go. There you go. We're doing that full, live Hassan reaction.
By Luke Stanger. And the reception took a message and they said they wanted to speak because there was a dossier on me. And I thought, what the hell is going on here? I didn't respond. My stepdad was the owner of the firm at the time, and he didn't respond either. A few days later, we received another phone call from Jonathan Hoffman.
Jonathan Hoffman is a pro-Israel activist and an advisor to the campaigning group Labour Against Anti-Semitism. He's been convicted of aggressive and bullying behaviour.
Jonathan Hoffman said something along the lines of that he had.
But was that like abusive behaviour? Was that in relation to something in the Labour Party? You need to at least stay further in that, please, Al Jazeera.
On me and wanted that to be shown. Then the dossier was sent through to my stepdad, my pa's private email address, and that dossier was horrendous reading. It was awful. It was interactions of me with someone online where that person said they wanted to behead my family. They wanted to behead me and my family. And they said a whole number of things. I don't know if I can repeat them. I can't repeat them about my mother. To make those threats against me and my family, and to say those things about my mother. My stepdad read that, and he was very upset.
I've got curry downstairs. I want to add that to it.
About reading all of that. I can't talk about most of it. My mum worked for the NHS. She was a good person.
In Liverpool, Anna Rothery decides to seek legal advice. Her lawyer accuses the interview panel of subjecting her to
an unfair, arbitrary, capricious, and irrational process.
They seek legal redress.
Our client will seek an emergency in.
You can only assume that it was deliberately released to try and coincide with the conference. I mean, with good reason.
Interim injunction to enable her name to go forward on the ballot to Labour members in Liverpool.
And so we decided that we would ask them to halt the process in terms of the vote, etc., and to give them time to put a case forward as to why I couldn't stand.
Rothery's lawyer reminds the Labour Party that it has a
legal duty to preserve all relevant documents in your control,
including
any documents passing between you and the other panel members.
The panel decides to exclude Rothery and both other candidates from the shortlist.
We were basically told that they were reopening the contest and we need not apply.
The party tells her that the decision was taken after giving
careful consideration to the additional information presented to it.
I still was, doing the duties of a Lord Mayor. I just felt completely deflated and undermined. I felt like it'd been a full-blown character assassination. I still can't make head or tail of it, even all this time after.
Rothery's lawyer seeks an injunction. He asserts the legal right to view evidence.
Please disclose all additional information presented about our client.
The party's lawyers respond to Rothery's request for disclosure of documents.
We decline to provide the disclosure requested. None of the documents you seek from the Labour Party appears to be relevant to the decision to remove your client from the...
It means you can literally just say... no, we disagree with the document. You don't need to see those documents aren't relevant. You don't need to see them. No. Just leave them over there. They're not relevant. We promise they're not relevant. They could literally be the damning evidence, and you could just tell them that they're not relevant to the case, and then they would stay completely stum forever.
Shortlist.
Alan Dean's letter is never presented to Rothery's lawyer or to the court. Nor is a letter sent by Nick Small repeating the allegation that Rothery had prodded him at a dinner in 2011.
My word. A lot of time and effort has gone into this on their behalf.
The Labour Party has an obligation.
If it looks weird, by the way, that I'm gifting memberships myself, is that I get I get the money back. It's like 70% of it back, and it boosts the video in the algorithm.
To observe due process and fair dealing. So the judge wasn't given the full picture. Now, there is a problem here. If that's the way the Labour Party is conducting itself in opposition, under, let's remember, Keir Starmer, the former Director of Public Prosecutions, is Sir Keir Starmer now going to behave like that in power?
The injunction is refused, and Rothery ordered to pay $90,000 in costs to the party.
I think I was literally hung out to dry by a party that I've been loyal to for many years.
At Labour headquarters, the General Secretary congratulates the party's senior lawyer, Alex Burrows-Curtis.
Thoroughly well done. Your contract has been agreed. We will not be including a win bonus.
The activist Luke Stanger is seeking...
It's just so slimy. I just didn't expect it to be so incredibly slimy.
...to overturn his suspension from the party. He is represented by an expensive City of London law firm. Mishcon de Reya are hired to challenge Stanger's suspension. The Labour files reveal the support that Stanger enjoys amongst senior politicians from the right of the party. He receives character references from 14 MPs, 30 councillors, and dozens of party activists. Gareth Thomas, the Labour MP for Harrow West.
I was very sad to hear of Luke Stanger's recent suspension from the Labour Party. I hope his case can be concluded soon and he can continue to be a good friend to Harrow Labour in future years to come.
I think that people are actually quite dangerous who are in the Labour Party. The way that they're behaving, it's quite astonishing, really.
The Labour Party now welcomes apartheid-supporting racists and abusers of women. And how that could possibly have happened is beyond me.
I mean, you say that you're surprised, and you don't. How could this possibly happen? I mean, so many people, pretty reprehensible people, have always been members of the Labour Party, to be honest, or at least they have been since the 90s, right?
Stanger is on the campaign team for Peter Kyle, the Labour MP for Hove. Stanger describes himself as his representative. Kyle sends Stanger an email.
I have always found you an amazing, active campaigner on behalf of the Labour Party.
All statues deserve poop on them. That's what you get for hero worship.
Well, I'm not the same person. That is certainly true. In terms of security, I'm always thinking about locks on doors, windows. Where is my family? I'm always worried about them. And so on me and my family, all of my family, we are frightened as a result of what's happened to us.
Steve Reed, Labour MP for Croydon North and now Opposition Minister for Justice, praises Stanger.
I have met Luke many times while out campaigning for the Labour Party. It would be wrong to exclude him from continuing to play a role in the party he loves so much.
The Labour Party doesn't care.
Just don't be a piece of shit then, mate. And then maybe you won't get suspended.
I've reported all of this to the Labour Party. At the end of the day, that evil took place, and, it's still a scar. It's still a scar on me. It's a scar on my sister, my whole family. And it's still there. No one has dealt with it. No one has dealt with this.
The highest disciplinary body.
By the way, if you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe to get future extra content pumped into your veins. If you're watching on Twitch, you can also follow.
In the party votes to expel Stanger, but his expulsion is never carried out. The former head of the governance and legal unit, John Stolliday, voices his support.
Luke is a gentle giant who gives his all to his progressive political beliefs and his deep commitment to equality and, above all, getting Labour elected.
My dad read those terrible comments, and he was upset about that. And he died not long after that. So that evil that was put into our lives caused my pa to die. I'm sure that was a central part of what happened.
I mean, we can get better material than just pulling on our heartstrings, right? Obviously, this is terrible, but I want to see more facts, more dirty dealings. Second part makes it more horrid collaborative work between EDL and the right of pro-Zionism Labour. Yeah, I mean, well, I'll be watching the next one straight after as well.
And the lack of safety for me and my family, the awful words that were used about my mother, I think I'm still in a state of shock. I don't think I'll ever get over it.
It's a completely despicable place to find ourselves after people have made so many sacrifices over so many decades fighting for a party that represents the working classes, to end up at this point where we're being betrayed by our own party.
Well, that's what I've said a lot of the time, right? Is that the issue is that because there's two big pillars of UK politics, if you're a career politician, you have to join one of the two biggest parties, or possibly the Lib Dems, to be able to get anywhere in politics or get anywhere post-politics, right? That's why you have people like Chuka Ramuna, who now just work at investment banks, despite ostensibly being in a pro-workers party. Yep, they terminated the suspension. It's crazy shit. So if you are someone who's getting into politics for unscrupulous reasons, like just to make a bunch of money, as Peter O'Bon has explained in a really good clip on Newswipe, you can't not join the Tories or the Labour Party. You have to join one of them, otherwise you're never going to get the platform that you can then put on your CV for a future business role. So that's why Liberals have taken over the Labour Party, not because they really feel like they want to be able to get their political whims applied in future. It's because they want to be able to personally make a big fortune. Like, you look at Blair, who's now Middle East envoy for some fucking reason, and is now just hugely wealthy off the back of his property empire.
It's a big no-no in my eyes.
The Labour Party is a criminal conspiracy against its members. It acts unlawfully. It libels its members. It gives no natural justice to those accused of offences, and it tears up the rule book, the Constitution, on a whim.
It's Mr. Rules. Hey, thank you for... Oh, you got the... I say thank you for the... You got gifted a membership by me. Well, you're a member now, Iron Mage. Well done. You were the beneficiary of all my gifted memberships. I love how this Positive Rule is literally Mr. Rules is in charge of the rules-based organisation. Clearly it's Mr. Rules. Why would they break any of the rules apart from the rules that he clearly broke? Yeah, like the panorama shit. We're definitely going to get to that because that's crazy shit, that is. Well, that's the problem is that he says, oh, his sole, Ian McNichol saying this, his sole focus is the Labour Party victory, right? Yet they in their minds believe that there can be no Labour victory without purging the left, so they feel like the ends justify the means.
In the second episode of the Labour Files, the true story behind the party's anti-Semitism crisis.
I feel so ashamed.
Like the sad part is, JDM, right, is I can live with compromise, right? Even in the cutthroat world of politics, even in the world in which there's, you know, huge amounts of internal bickering going on, and the people, you know, unscrupulous members trying to use up the party's platform to be able for their own ends, right? I can live with compromise. I can live with a compromise candidate. I could live with, you know, Labour having a leader of the party who I didn't agree with on every issue, but only implemented part of like the policy of the social democratic platform that I would like to see implemented, right? I wouldn't mind. The issue is that we have a leader of a party at the moment who literally just wants us to, who doesn't want people like me to be part of the party, wants to excise people like me from the party, doesn't care about my rights, not only as, not only as a, as a working person, or as a trans person. It's explicit that they do not care about people who want me literally to be, you know, removed from society in their party, right? Like, I could cope with a compromise position where I supported Labour because I believe that, the evil of the Tories must be defeated any which way, whatever. But it's clear they do not want me to vote for them. They don't want to support any policy platforms that I agree with, and they don't want me to be in the party, and they don't care. Like, I'm in an affiliated union, so at least I get votes on who the party leader is. But that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's all I want to do, all I care about. The only reason I'm voting Labour at the next election is if Greg Marshall stands in my constituency again, which is Broxtowe, because he's a really great councillor and is a Corbyn ally. But that's the only reason why I'd ever vote Labour in the future at this point, with Keir Starmer as leader and given the platform that they have. You're right, Sense Williams. Good to see you.
Ashamed right now that it's come to this.
I'm sick of people like you speaking for me!
How truth was subverted.
Oh, Jeremy's a racist!
And reality turned on its head.
That's an absolute lie. I didn't say that.
The media was not interested in the reality of the story.
Shut your mouth!
Right, part 2, let's go! In proper quality, please.
So I'd had a series of threatening phone calls without caller's number withheld. And they were threatening to...
If you're watching on YouTube, please turn on the setting that allows people to gift you subscriptions. I don't know why that's auto turned off. Iron Mage, please let people know in chat how to turn that on so they can be gifted the wonderful membership that I have bestowed upon them in my almighty wisdom of 30% of the usual cost.
To come to my house. And then I happened to miss a call and noticed there was a message. When I played it, I realised the person had made a mistake because he'd left his number effectively because he'd left a message. And this was the call.
You Nazi scum. You should burn in a gas oven, you dirty Nazi cow you are. Sticky swine. I hope you die in a gas oven. You deserved everything you do in hell to burn in acid.
I was very, very shaky. I mean, such kind of absolutely uncontrollable rage and fury. I mean, the idea that Jews should be talking to other Jews in this vile way. I mean, it was like many other things I've had, but obviously so much worse, so much more overt and crazed, really.
All political parties equally like to win. Which would you prefer? I mean, Breakthrough? I mean, that's probably the only party that actually explicitly stands on a platform that I endorse. Like, if you had proportional representation, I would vote Breakthrough with no questions asked. I would vote Breakthrough.
Al Jazeera has obtained the largest leak of documents in British political history.
Oh my God.
But things, given the arrangement though, like, at what point is the Cooperative Party just the same as the Labour at this point?
This is unbelievable. It is absolutely shocking.
Hundreds of thousands of internal communications expose how operatives secretly take control of Britain's Labour Party.
The Labour Party is a criminal conspiracy against its members.
Free speech was shut down.
They tell the inside story of how Sir Keir Starmer, who could be Britain's next Prime Minister, leads a lawless party.
I've waited 17 months to appear in front of you in this hall as leader of our great party.
Confidential documents expose tactics to...
This face, this Keir's face makes me seethe with rage. Like, he's such an incredibly awful human being. I just cannot put it into words how much I despise him.
Credit and expel rivals in the party.
People are actually quite dangerous who are in the Labour Party.
They were playing with people's lives here.
They reveal how Starmer's predecessor was undermined by a smear campaign from within.
It disabled him as a politician and as a potential Prime Minister.
Really nice to see you here. Bye.
How
Oh shit, Iron Mage, were you in Duffield's constituency? Was it anti-Nazis? Or Maestro Cordova? I don't even know. One of
British
those,
democracy.
those like the main ones when it comes down to like turfs in the Labour Party. It's Rosie Duffield, Tony Antoninazzi, and Maestro Cordova.
Known as the Mother of Parliaments, is
And De Cordova was like LGBT officer, right?
being undermined by spying and dirty tricks.
No one would expect that a political party would associate themselves with a whole-scale hacking of the press.
It looks like somebody is constantly monitoring me, where I'm going and where my car is parked and where my children is going.
It just stinks to high heaven what they're doing in the background.
We speak to people whose voices have been silenced, including those who support Palestinian rights.
It's very painful. As Palestinians, there was no room for us to enter this debate, and that's how it was designed to be.
And the files reveal how a hierarchy of racism exists under Starmer's leadership.
I face more racism in the Labour Party than I have in the rest of my life combined.
In episode 2, the true story behind the Labour Party's anti-Semitism crisis.
I feel so ashamed.
Look here, this is a tweet by Labour to Win from the guy who is head of the disciplinary body for the Labour Party, literally saying that his job is just to excise the hard left, by which he means any Northern European social democrat at this point. These people are absolute scum. Absolute scum.
Right now that it's come to this.
I'm sick of people like you speaking for me!
We reveal how truth was subverted
Oh, Jeremy's a racist!
and reality turned on its head.
That's an absolute lie. I didn't say that.
The media was not interested in the reality of the story.
Shut your mouth!
Now, breakthrough is explicitly like DemSoc, JDM. It's not like Workers' Party. I mean, Workers' Party of GB is basically just a front for CPG, BML. No, like Breakthrough is explicitly like a pro-Corbyn platform specifically, right?
Mr. Corbyn, I'm from Sky News.
From
Sky News.
Well, goodbye.
Mr. Corbyn, what are you going to do about the perceived anti-Semitism in your party? Mr. Corbyn, have you got any comment?
Jeremy Corbyn devoted his political career to fighting racism. Suddenly he becomes Labour
That's fair, Iron Mage.
leader, and the media combines to tell the world that this man is not an anti-racist, he is actually a racist.
Mr. Corbyn, what's your response?
Howdy, Eustace Plimsoll. Hope you're doing well.
It disabled him as a politician and as a potential prime minister. Instead of being able to set out his social democratic vision of social justice, he was obliged to fend off one allegation after another that he was actually a noxious racist, or at any rate, enabled noxious racists.
We stand absolutely against anti-Semitism in any form.
We will not tolerate anti-Semitism in any form whatsoever in the party.
Let me be absolutely clear. Anti-Semitism is an evil.
We in the Labour movement will never be complacent about anti-Semitism. We all need to do better.
And under a Labour government, it will not be tolerated in any form whatsoever.
I regard the fight against anti-Semitism as an absolute priority. People who hold anti-Semitic views have no place in the Labour Party.
This party, this movement, will always be implacable campaigners against
Yeah, definitely did, Iron Mage.
anti-Semitism and racism in all its forms. We are your ally.
This morning, the Equality and Human Rights Commission published their final report into anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. I found this report hard to read. And it is a...
The thing is, I actually found it pretty easy to read. Like, the fact that, I mean, there were some things that said were anti-Semitic, and these were bad, and they were dealt with poorly, but they did not say that the party was institutionally anti-Semitic. They never did. And it's really strange that, there's been no investigation to Tory Islamophobia. Would it be that the HRC is entirely stuffed with Tory puppets? Yeah, it turns out they are. Not only no Tory puppets, also transphobic puppets as well.
Day of shame for the Labour Party.
Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party was condemned for anti-Semitism. The Labour files reveal they were the victims of distortions and misrepresentation. The files contain the entire contents of the party's disciplinary folders since before Jeremy Corbyn became leader in 2015.
We have really
detailed data and information that one doesn't normally see about a political party.
The I-Unit investigation draws too on voices that have been sidelined. Jews who supported Corbyn, but don't support Israel. And British Palestinians.
It was...
Well, the sovereign nation of Ancapistan. It reminds me that there's some terra nullius in. So basically, there's a territorial dispute. I think it's between Serbia and Croatia, like along like bits of the kind of the meanders of the Danube, and in one of those meanders, there is a Yeah, thanks for subbing on YouTube, JDM. Much appreciated. There's actually a piece of terra nullius within one of the meanders where there's a disputed border between Serbia and Croatia. I have no idea why. A disputed border where neither of them wants the territory, which is why terra nullius. And there's a millionaire bought that piece of terra nullius and turned it into what he calls Liberland, like his libertarian paradise. And guess how many people live there? Nobody. No one fucking lives in Liberland.
Painful. As Palestinians, it's very hard for you to enter the debates, and that's how it was designed to be.
In 2016, Labour Party member Helen Marks is interviewed by party officials as part of an investigation into her local constituency Labour Party.
We'd been accused of anti-Semitism by a member of the CLP, who was also a councillor. I felt it was a totally outrageous accusation. What he was doing was equating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism.
Oh yeah, 100% JDM. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Or like charter cities, as they're being termed now.
My father lost all his family.
And Freeport.
During the Holocaust. His parents were rounded up and killed either in the Warsaw Ghetto or taken off to a concentration camp.
Rika Bird attends the interview as a witness, what's called a silent friend. Both women are...
By the way, if you're watching on YouTube, can you all remove your like from the stream and then immediately add it again once I hear this?
Jewish. 3 years later, Panorama, the BBC's longest-running current affairs programme, broadcast a damning film.
Do you think Mr. Corbyn is anti-Semitic?
Well, that's the whole hierarchy of racism stuff that we heard about in the Ford report, DJJ.
I've been asked that a number of times, and you can tell from my pause that it's still a question I struggle with.
Labour's internal communications reveal the anger of party officials at what they regard as a betrayal of the BBC's duty of impartiality.
The BBC has used its market monopoly and might as a public broadcaster to run a biased political agenda. It's not a programme about anti-Semitism, it's a hit piece.
A description of Marks and Bird's disciplinary interview features in the documentary. The interview is conducted by Ben Westerman, a party official who is Jewish.
Ben Westerman received dozens of complaints. While interviewing one member, he was confronted with the very anti-Semitism he'd been investigating.
And we finished the interview. The person got up to leave the room and then turned back to me and said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "What do you mean, where am I from?" And she said, "I asked you, where are you from?" And I said, "I'm not prepared to discuss this." And they said, "Are you..."
Yeah, Bir Tawil, but it's because Egypt and Sudan are fighting over the Halab Triangle because of basically a difference between like the original border supposed to be the 12th parallel, and then the British border was supposed to be give Bir Tawil to Egypt and give the Halab Triangle to Sudan because it was more in keeping with the actual kind of cultures of Sudan. I don't even know why. I don't know the whole story, but obviously the Halab Triangle, the Bir Tawil, where nothing is much less coveted than the Halab Triangle, which has loads of oil.
From Israel. What can you say to that? You are assumed to be in cahoots with the Israeli government. It's this obsession with that just spills over all the time into anti-Semitism.
Rika Bird speaks to Westerman at the end of the interview.
When he says, where are you from? Are you from Israel? That's an absolute lie. I didn't say that.
With Westerman's permission, the two women record the interview.
The full recording shows what actually did happen.
Everyone put your like back on now.
Curious because I haven't been in the Labour Party very long and I've certainly never been to anything like this informal interview before. So I'm just curious about, like, what branch are you in?
I don't think that's relevant.
Okay.
I hope that's okay. I don't think where I'm from is at all relevant to the investigation.
I did ask Westerman what branch are you from? Meaning what branch of the Labour Party, because it was a Labour Party internal investigation. The word Israel never came into the exchange between me and Westermann.
At the time, I could hardly believe it, but I actually feel very angry about it now, because I feel it's so trivialising what is a really important issue.
A veteran anti-racist campaigner analyses Labour's confidential disciplinary files.
My mother was a Holocaust survivor who lost dozens of...
It's just crazy that they literally in BBC, they absolutely made up stuff that didn't happen. It's also amusing for, especially considering how like Liberals got absolutely crazy at Boris Johnson for the idea that he made up a quote, and because he did make up a quote in newspaper because of course he's a liar, like half the people in politics are, and yet they make up actual false allegations of anti-Semitism, and they're just going to be completely silent about it. It's because they just don't care. They just don't care.
Of her own family, primarily in Auschwitz and Theresienstadt. I am a former ANC Member of Parliament from South Africa, where I served under Nelson Mandela, and I have written and lectured, including at Auschwitz, on genocide prevention.
Hundreds of party activists are suspended and expelled on the basis of evidence in these files. It consists largely of social media posts.
But you've got to hunt the trots, though.
Are examples of genuine, clear anti-Semitism. You know, here is an example that says...
Hey, welcome to the Justice Stream, Chase Student. Much appreciated.
The enemy is not Muslims or Christians or Judaism. The real enemy is Rothschild Zionism. The Rothschild family holds about 80% of the world's total wealth. Rothschild dynasty. This is a fairly standard anti-Semitic trope. An image from social media with the word obey in large letters.
You're right, Samuel Andretti. How you keeping? Remember, guys, turn on accepting gifts if you're in YouTube chat.
And how Jews control the American media. Here is another one. Who killed JFK? Who killed Lincoln? Who attacked the USS Liberty? Who is attacking our liberty? I'll tell you who, Jews. We can see real anti-Semitism. But then there is also a lot of information in these disciplinary files where there is clearly no anti-Semitism whatsoever. There's one post that reads, in memory of 4 little footballers, rest in peace. And I'm sure many people will recall these 4 young kids, 9 to 11 years old, playing football on the beach, who were shot dead by Israeli forces. Another example. We demand that International Criminal Court and the UN charge Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel for war crimes against humanity. Very similar. Put Israel...
And like the double standards as well, right? And just all this, like the tacit admission, especially from people like old Noah McNichol, that what they were doing was just entirely, partisan in nature rather than because of any actual belief in whether or not anything was actually true or not.
On trial for war crimes. To suggest that this is somehow anti-Semitic is simply trying to avoid Israel being called out for its appalling abuses in the occupied territories.
Files reveal a number of party members are investigated for sharing links to a 2017 I-Unit investigation. The lobby establishes ties between the Israeli embassy in London and organisations within the Labour Party. An officer for the parliamentary group Labour Friends of Israel is covertly filmed.
We work really closely together. But like, a lot of this kind of seems keeping it as a separate thing is actually better and wrong because ultimately we've got the same end goal of getting more people to be pro-Israel and to understand the conflict. It's just how you do it.
This was film. This is evidence. Now this is sufficient reason to be investigated because you refer to this film by Al Jazeera that has been seen all over the world that was actually...
Yeah, there is a bit of a YouTube delay here. The chat's coming through quite late. I hope the Twitch stream is actually coming through okay.
Actually critically acclaimed in many places. This is an attempt to close down any sort of meaningful political discussion or political debate on these matters.
As well as Labour Friends of Israel, the lobby also exposes links between the Israeli embassy and the grassroots Jewish labour movement. Both organisations are critics of Corbyn. Many of those investigated by the Labour Party believe that Israel is an apartheid state. Israel was created in 1948 by forming a Jewish homeland within historic Palestine, the culmination of the Zionist dream. In 1967, Israel invaded and occupied the remaining Palestinian land. Israel has since isolated Gaza while building illegal settlements in the West Bank, slowly diminishing the size of a potential Palestinian state. Palestinians effectively live under Israeli military control and do not have equal rights.
It's not anti-Semitic to call Israel an apartheid state. It's simply a fact. We have the Amnesty International report, the Human Rights report.
Like, my favourite thing is when people will say, are you calling Israel an apartheid state? It's offensive to people who lived under apartheid in South Africa, when South African government has explicitly called Israel an apartheid state, including people like Desmond Tutu.
Report.
I think Mandela said it as well.
Israel's own one, its major human rights organizations, B'Tselem, have also come to this conclusion.
Israel launches an assault on the Gaza Strip following the murder of 3 Israeli teenagers.
What we saw was Israel bombard the Gaza Strip, bombard one of the most densely populated areas on Earth. And in the space of 50 days, they killed over 2,200 Palestinians, including 500 children.
Yeah, I was getting weird stuff happening on my end with latency on the stream. I do apologise for the delay.
And I remember, with my brothers, and, they try and act quite tough, but, they would call me crying on the phone.
It was the most horrific assault on Gaza. The place was devastated. It was a bomb to smithereens. It was a deeply shocking event in a history of repeated shocking events.
Jeremy Corbyn is elected leader of the Labour Party on a radical ticket that challenges Britain's establishment.
When Jeremy Corbyn became leader, we were so overjoyed.
The continuing occupation, the expansion of illegal settlements, and the imprisonment of Palestinian children are an outrage.
At last, we have a Western politician who actually sympathizes with the Palestinians.
And in order to help make that two-state settlement a reality, we will recognize a Palestinian state as soon as we take office.
I mean, the fact that that's a controversial statement, right? To say we will recognise a Palestinian state. The UN recognises a Palestinian state, right? The literal fucking United Nations, right? But it's just the antithesis of liberal politics, the world over. That they even something as completely inane as we agree with the United Nations on the state of Palestine is seen as heresy.
Anger over events in Gaza means that many of Corbyn's supporters end up in Labour's disciplinary files.
Rot in hell, you Zionist bastards, and those who support them. I boycott Israel because it is a criminal, land-thieving, abusive, murderous, occupying, human rights denying apartheid state. You can't cover your crimes with claims of anti-Semitism. And I personally, when I came across this, must admit that I find it difficult because it is a brutal image. But a liberation struggle by its very nature, by its definition, is going to involve huge frustrations, huge anger, extraordinary suffering. I saw the same.
What's interesting as well as that is that the conflict that you get, like the ideological conflict that you get between people who recognise, the apartheid state in Israel and those who disagree with that assessment, is that it does create essentially an ethnic war or an ethnic conflict of ideas between people who support the two different main ethnicities between Israel and Palestine, right? And then by people who then use that and then will make anti-Semitic statements because of that, that is essentially, that helps Israel, right? They are happy for it to be an ethnic conflict rather than something that you can view through a humanitarian lens, where you recognise the the humanity of both the populations of Israel and the populations of Palestine, right? The regular people rather than the administrations of those states, right? Whereas by turning it into an ethnic conflict, that really does help people, especially like Netanyahu at the time, right? People like Likud, who do view they do want Israel explicitly to exist as an ethno-state, and they do have this kind of this religious fervor in the idea that their race of people deserve they have the divine right to occupy the Levant, right? And by creating this, by making people more anti-Semitic about them, it helps their own narrative, which is why people who get taken in by it and then do and say anti-Semitic things when criticizing Israel, that makes everything even worse, right? So it really is important to make sure that your criticisms of Israel are explicitly about the state of Israel and the government itself, rather than just general Israeli citizens, or apart from, of course, people who settle within Palestinian territory. But even then, people who move over from Brooklyn and then just settle in like Ramallah or whatever and take people's houses away. Like that's where the criticism needs to lie. Again, you have to be super explicit with these things, because if you just criticize the state of Israel, then liberals will think you're critiquing every member of the state of Israel, because again, they view states as being the will of the people rather than a construct that people use to be able to have a administrative area to be able to pass policy in, right?
Thing in South Africa. In 1976, when hundreds of innocent, unarmed school children were shot dead by the apartheid military, of course there was outrage, anger, and high emotions around the world.
You're right, Radhom. Turns out that the right of the Labour Party is full of twats who lie about stuff, who fabricate quotes, who explicitly try and expel people that they dislike for their having a different political view. And we're watching an Al Jazeera expose on it right now.
World, and so there should have been. This is no different.
Not surprised about the exit poll line, Mage. They look like they were going to win from the start, to be honest, and Italy is becoming even more regressive. I mean, where did fascism bear roots in Europe outside of Germany? Well, there's your answer.
It's somehow implicitly understood that there are things you can't say. So one of them is you can't talk about your experiences in harrowing terms. You have to keep it sort of cool, and you can't talk about Israel in the way that it should be talked about.
When I started hearing and getting more active about anti-Semitism, I was just confused, because Palestinians never chose who their occupier was. They didn't choose who forced them out of their homes. They didn't choose which religion they were going to say they acted in the name of. There was no choice in that.
Time to apologise, Mr. Livingston.
Accusations of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party emerge after former London Mayor Ken Livingstone is attacked for claiming that Hitler had been a supporter of Zionism.
You're a lying racist, a Nazi apologist, a Nazi apologist, a Nazi apologist. You dare say that Hitler supported Zionism? You've lost it, mate. You need help. You need help.
The party announces an inquiry into anti-Semitism and other forms of racism. The launch is overshadowed when a pro-Corbyn activist asks a question. Mark Wadsworth wrote a press release that had been criticised by a journalist from the right-leaning Daily Telegraph. He saw the journalist give it to a Labour MP.
I saw that the Telegraph handed a copy of a press release to Ruth Smith MP, so you can see who's working hand in hand. I'm pleased that...
She stormed out. She put out a statement claiming that this activist had been guilty of a classic anti-Jewish trope, that Jewish people controlled the media. It's stomach-churning. Didn't know she was...
I think this will happen a lot, where by acknowledging the fact that there is bourgeois control of the media, right? So they'll fit a bourgeois narrative. People somehow imprint onto that somehow by bourgeois you mean Jewish. Well, no, it's just a relationship to the means of production, right? The no ethnicity has any kind of any stranglehold. They have no monopoly over being like someone who owns a means of production. Especially when I talk about the UK media, where literally no Jewish person controls any media outlet in the UK, just like literally zero, right? There's just none. There's just no Jewish control for any pieces of UK media whatsoever. So by criticising the ownership of these, like, well, what part of this is Jewish that would necessitate rebutting this with anti-Semitism claims?
Jewish. I had no reason to know she was Jewish. I sent through my solicitors, Ruth Smith, a letter saying that what she'd said about me, I could clearly be identified as libelous, and that she should withdraw it. She took the statement down. I don't think anybody reported the fact that she took the statement down. It's appalling.
And we now have the Ford report that shows that we know that Labour right activists were colluding with the press and leaking them stories. So it's clear there's going to be some kind of reciprocity from the media at that point as well, especially with people like Ruth Smith, who were intimately tied to a lot of the stuff that was happening to the left-wing members of the party.
Existence of my party, the Labour Party, is at stake. Every racist anti-Semite out of the Labour Party. It's time for Jeremy Corbyn to act.
Criticism of the Labour Party mounts. But not all British Jews oppose the Labour leader. The row over anti-Semitism exposed...
Yeah, I think I remember seeing at one point, Radham, about there being some nebulous idea that Hitler proposed that all Jews should be expelled from Europe to Asia, something like that. I mean, it sounds up his alley, but I never thought that being like something explicitly supported. So I don't know. Like, Ken Livingstone was expelled for anti-Semitism, so.
There's divisions within the Jewish community.
Lots of Jewish people were among the enthusiasts for Jeremy Corbyn. But when the attacks started to really ratchet up against Jeremy and his supporters, who were being absolutely demonised and vilified in the media, we talked to others in the party and decided that there was a need for a group which expressed an alternative Jewish view.
Pro-Corbyn Jews form Jewish Voice for Labour. JVL is critical of Israel and Zionism. Unlike its larger rivals, the Jewish Labour Movement and Labour Friends of Israel, both of which are supportive of Israel.
For the first time ever, the Labour Party has walked into the disagreement between Jews over Zionism and said one sort of Jews are not only wrong, but they're guilty of anti-Semitism. It's a phenomenon.
My understanding of anti-Semitism has always been that it is a prejudice or hatred.
Come now, Al Jazeera, it's KC, not QC.
Jews as Jews, simply because they are Jews or believed to be Jews. Unfortunately, there has developed what is called the new anti-Semitism, that to criticize Israel is inherently anti-Semitic.
What's being claimed by people, by many Jews, is that Israel is part of their identity. But more than that, it's part of their Jewish identity. It is essentially turning criticism of Israel and Zionism into anti-Semitism.
The idea that Jew equals Zionist and that anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism is dangerous, it's reprehensible, it's an abomination to me.
100%. And again, this alignment of the entirety of the international Jewish community with Israel specifically, as again, that is within the far right people like Likud remit, as far as they're concerned, as when they were the governing party of Israel, right? By trying to tie these things explicitly together, it means that you can continue furthering essentially their narrative about an ethno-state, right? When we all know that the Jewish community, the international Jewish community, is in no way connected to Israel as a country. Just because it's the Jewish ethno-state doesn't mean that it represents the international Jewish community at all. In the same way that the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Right, that doesn't represent the majority Muslim view of the world at all. They don't represent the Islamic State. Doesn't represent the international Muslim community, and far from it. Right, obviously, people like the Taliban and the Islamic State are far more extreme than Israel is. Right, but it's the same. You cannot hold a single state that tries to claim an ethnic or religious identity for representing the entirety of the movement of that community internationally, in the same way that you can't, regardless of which ethnicity or religion that is, right?
Jewish Voice for Labour is supported by Palestinians in the party, who believe they are the victims of racism.
Anybody who knows anything about the history knows very well that Israel was created on the basis of a state.
Thank you for the link, Raton. Interesting. And again, the more you know.
Whose population would be of one community and not others. This is exemplified in my own story. I mean, why should I and my family have left our homes? We felt we had to leave because there had been a dreadful massacre in a village called Deir Yassin, Palestinian village, in which Jewish militias assaulted the village and shot dead over 100 people. After that terrible massacre, a big jeep went around the streets of Jerusalem with the militias, with these Jewish militias in it, leaders, shouting out, "Your turn is next." And I have never been allowed to return. No member of my family has returned. No Palestinian I know has been allowed to return for the same racist reason. They're of the wrong race. So you keep them out. Well, if that isn't racism, I don't know what is.
Two of Corbyn's opponents confront pro-Palestinian protesters.
Well, that's the kind of ideological sleight of hand that you get from fascists nowadays, and age, where they just say, "Oh well, multiculturalism doesn't work, so we have to keep people apart. So they can get their homeland elsewhere, but we can keep our white homeland here." Right? That's the kind of the shift in ideology that you get to try and cover it up.
Most anti-Semitism campaigners belong to the political mainstream, but some are more militant.
So what we have here are militant Zionists, the people who campaign for the State of Israel.
Paul Scott is a pro-Palestinian activist.
You get to know all the faces. It's actually only a very small core of people. They are always there. In many cases, the people that they perceive to be anti-Semites are merely people who criticize the State of Israel.
Jonathan Hoffman is a former vice chair of the Zionist Federation. He will play an important role in the campaign against Corbyn. With him is Damon Lenzner, another pro-Israel activist. Following this incident, both men are convicted of aggressive bullying behaviour.
The aim is to provoke, to heckle, and in Jonathan Hoffman's case, it's usually to disrupt.
ISN, PSC, want to kill, dudes like me.
The I-Unit has discovered links between Hoffman and a far-right organisation.
That's the worst part as well, is that the regular Jews feel threatened because of all of this stuff, right? And that's it's horrendous that they knew that, so many narratives that we constructed that, make these people feel like they can't live in this country, which is horrendous, right? And all for partisan political gain over a dispute happening in an area of the world that's nowhere near where they live in the UK. Like, to be fair, I'm sure there's plenty of anti-Semitic abuse that they get with regardless, which is makes them less unlikely to want to stay in the UK regardless anyway, especially post-Brexit when people are getting even more racist, especially when the online conspiracy theories are much easier to be able to spread because of how social media lends virality to these claims. So things like the Rothschilds conspiracies and all that kind of stuff, and the rising issue with white nationalism and, the alt-right and all that kind of stuff that's happening, I can imagine they feel incredibly under threat, right? But the fact that so much of this is being exacerbated by a state conflict happening nowhere near this country, it's sad. It's really sad.
Members of the Racist English Defence League, or EDL, attended a demonstration that Hoffman helped organise. He is photographed alongside Roberta Moore, the founder of the EDL's Jewish division. She will later express her admiration for Anders Breivik, the neo-Nazi who murdered 77 people in Norway.
From around June 2010, the English Defence League started coming to demonstrations supporting the pro-Israel counter-demonstrators. So they were dressed in camouflage gear, they often had balaclavas, dogs with them, St. George's flags, the whole thing.
Hoffman is not the only pro-Israel activist who had links to the far right. He worked closely with blogger Richard Millett. Millett's blog regularly provided a platform for Roberta Moore and other EDL supporters.
There are lots of examples about right racism in Roberta Moore's comments on Richard Millett's blog. For example, she refers to burqa-clad dragons and filthy bearded vermin. Arabs have been eating camel for years. The cult of Islam has the power to turn normal human beings into beasts.
Hoffman and Millett distanced themselves from the EDL in 2011. Others in their circle of pro-Israel activists do not.
There's food on the table, it's very casual, and we're all going to participate. So we'll start here on my left.
Sharon Claff is co-founder of Campaign for Truth, an organisation that claims to promote greater understanding of Israel. Claff regularly expresses support for the English Defence League. She wrote on Millett's blog,
"They are salted."
Again, there's been this shift now where a bunch of alt-right figures will have huge amount of support for Israel because they believe that they have this view that it is the ethno-state that works, right? They have no connection to Jewish people, they have no connection to actual kind of, the Jewish community at all, but they will feign support for Israel because even though that they're anti-Semitic, they're happy that, that there is the ethno-state that works elsewhere. That means that it's proof somehow that they can then kick out other races to their own areas of the world that they believe they should live in, right?
Of the Earth people fighting for a democratically free England. We all share the greater enemy that is Islam.
She's hosting a gathering for people concerned about a Muslim Labour politician, Sadiq Khan, who is soon to become the Mayor of London.
And some of us were a little bit horrified about some of his alleged connections.
Richard Millett is there. Another guest is Dan Fox, a former director of Labour Friends of Israel, which includes a third of Labour MPs.
So my name's Dan. I'm an old friend of Sharon's and a long-standing Labour Party member and activist. I think Sharon has got me here tonight. I'm very happy to have been invited, and I will hopefully be putting the case counterintuitively for why Sadiq is actually the right choice for the Jews of London.
I'm gobsmacked. This is somebody who is on easy terms, refers to Sharon Claff as an old friend. He's there to persuade them that Sadiq Khan is the good Muslim, that he can be trusted. Dan Fox shouldn't be involved in that kind of gathering.
I didn't come from South Africa to be governed by Sharia law. If I want to be governed by Sharia law, I will go live in Saudi Arabia.
Whether you like it or not.
Of course, she's South African. Of course, she's Afrikaner.
Think it's racist or not, I would be very, very worried with a Muslim in charge. We know not all Muslims are terrorists, of course they're not, but most of the terrorists are Muslim. I don't know who is and who isn't. I'd rather err on the side of safety. I don't trust any of them.
Dan Fox is the partner of prominent Labour MP Stella Creasy. Creasy is among demonstrators who gather outside the Houses of Parliament.
I feel almost like I'm going to cry. I feel so ashamed right now that it's come to this.
The majority of Corbyn's critics do not embrace far-right politics, but they blame Corbyn for allowing anti-Semitism to flourish.
I think, right on. I think remember that dual debate with Destiny and Vorsh debating James Allsop and Eric Stryker, and James Allsop, I think he explicitly quotes Israel as the proof that the ethno-state works, right?
Now in unison, so that he can hear you over there. Enough is enough. Enough is enough.
But Corbyn has a problem, one that is ignored in the media coverage. As leader of the opposition, Corbyn has his own office, often known as Lotto. It's the party's General Secretary, Ian McNichol, who is in charge of party headquarters. And it's the disputes unit at party headquarters that handles anti-Semitism complaints. Corbyn inherited the party bureaucracy from previous, less radical party leaders.
For the first 2.5 years of his leadership, Jeremy Corbyn was obliged to work with a General Secretary who was hostile to him and ran a party machinery which was hostile to him.
I've never worked in an environment that was so sort of toxic and toxic and unfriendly. I remember, for example, the first time I went and walked around HQ, and we were just walking around one of the floors, and it just goes deathly silent.
I'm not sure. I don't know whether they knew they're being recorded or not.
The Labour files contain a WhatsApp conversation between 3 senior officials: Claire Frances Fuller, the head of internal governance, Tracy Allen, manager of the General Secretary's office, and Mike Crichton, the Director of Audit, Risk and Property. The messages refer to Jeremy Corbyn.
I am just about to stab him. That might be a disciplinary. Worth it, though.
Nothing in the rules about stabbing. Poor form, though.
Ah, so these must be friends of Jess Phillips.
Ian's got some great knives, but an ice pick would have a certain irony.
This is a reference to the General Secretary, Ian McNichol, and to the murder of Leon Trotsky.
Would killing your leader with an ice pick or knife not come under bringing the party into disrepute?
Not in this case.
Reading this, there's about a dozen people in this WhatsApp group, the most senior officials in the Labour Party. They obviously have total confidence in one another that this conversation is not going to be leaked. They're not taking orders from Mr. Corbyn, quite the opposite. They obviously hold the party leadership in contempt.
After a year as leader, Corbyn is forced to stand for a second time following an attempted coup. While the party establishment challenges Corbyn, he inspires hundreds of thousands of new members to join. Staff at party headquarters launched what is known as the validation process. They scour the social media of new members. It's claimed the goal is to weed out those who hold offensive views. The Labour files reveal the methodology used by party staff. They draw up a list of Labour MPs and search for abuse directed at them, and only at those MPs.
If you look at the name of the MPs, and I got a list of 57, and the very odd thing is, as far as I can see, there's scarcely a single supporter of Jeremy Corbyn on this list. It kind of loads it in a very significant way, but it's only going to pick up those hostile to the right wing of the party, i.e. Corbynite supporters.
We've had a bit of a overflow.
More than 11,000 members are identified as needing to be investigated. It creates a backlog in the disciplinary unit and diverts staff from tackling anti-Semitism.
Factionalism within the Labour Party was so endemic and so pronounced that it actually was disrupting the Labour Party's ability to deal with, for example, anti-Semitism cases.
The validation process is run by Sam Matthews, who soon becomes head of the disputes team handling anti-Semitism.
Denial is not an option. Prevarication is not an option. Being a bystander who turns their head the other way is not an option. The time for action is now.
By the spring of 2018, Corbyn is as frustrated as his critics. The Labour files show that in February that year, Corbyn writes to the party's General Secretary, Ian McNichol, angry that the disputes team under Sam Matthews is so ineffective in tackling anti-Semitism.
It is clear that the current processes are far too slow to meet the volume of disciplinary cases the party has to deal with.
In a draft response, McNichol claims the scale of anti-Semitism in the party is exaggerated.
Over half of the complaints made relate to non-members and therefore are not a matter for the complaints team.
He urges Corbyn to
remind colleagues in the Shadow Cabinet and the Parliamentary Labour Party that misguided comments attacking the unit undermine the work they do and serve only those in the right-wing press.
In April 2018, Corbyn puts close ally Jenny Formby in charge of the party bureaucracy. Formby replaces McNichol as General Secretary at party headquarters, finally giving the leadership authority over the disputes department. Staff brought in by Formby to work on disputes are appalled at what they find.
There was no record keeping, so a number of members had been suspended or investigated. However, we couldn't find the evidence for what caused the suspension or the investigation. So it was clear to me that cases just hadn't been worked on. So for me to start in 2019 and have first eyes on cases from 2016 was quite absurd.
Once Corbyn is in control of the party bureaucracy, the disciplinary process improves.
This graph shows.
I'm glad that they're actually acknowledging this, because this isn't just like leak stuff. This isn't something from like the Chakrabarti report or the Ford report. This is from the EHRC report. The EHRC report acknowledges that when Ian McNichol goes and Jenny Formby takes over, the complaints process improves. Right? That's in the EHRC report that everyone claims that they've read. Obviously, I reacted to it on streams, so I know this shit. But plenty of people who claim that it's just this damning indictment of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership just don't even know any of the shit that's even in the report.
There's the number of suspensions, investigations and expulsions from the Labour Party on grounds of anti-Semitism all through the Corbyn era. And this is the moment when Jenny Formby becomes General Secretary of the Labour Party, enabling Jeremy Corbyn to take control of the bureaucracy of how Labour works. After they took control, the number of investigations, suspensions and expulsions went up exponentially. This graph on its own does a great deal to raise deep questions about the dominant media narrative on the Corbyn era.
Analysis of the party's internal disciplinary statistics tells the same story. During the 2.5 years that McNichol is Corbyn's General Secretary, 44 anti-Semitism cases are brought before the party's ruling National Executive Committee. In the 2 years Jenny Formby is in charge, 379 anti-Semitism cases go before the NEC. The NEC decides whether to suspend or expel members.
The key finding, backed up by the evidence, which we can see represented graphically here, is that the key failings of the Labour Party on anti-Semitism took place in the period before April 2018, before Jeremy Corbyn had control of the party bureaucracy.
Yet Jeremy Corbyn has taken all the blame, and his factional opponents within the party, none at all.
That's the thing, like, since when did any report or any discussion of the handling of anti-Semitism cases ever mention, like, in the mainstream media? When does Ian McNichol's name ever come up? Never. They never talk about it. It's ridiculous.
BBC Panorama's damning film on Labour's handling of anti-Semitism is the culmination of 3 years' hostile media coverage.
Shame on you! Shame on you! I am heartbroken and disgusted that the party that I joined over a decade ago is now institutionally racist.
The Panorama features interviewees drawn almost entirely from the period when Ian McNichol was General Secretary and Sam Matthews ran the Disputes Unit. Panorama's interviewees...
And these people were all the people who got paid off by Starmer in, like, six-figure sums, whatever, so, like, helped bankrupt their own party to try and... That's how much they really wanted to get rid of him.
...claim that attempts to tackle anti-Semitism were undermined by the Corbyn leadership.
Mr Corbyn and his office have repeatedly said that when party members are accused of anti-Semitism, they don't interfere in the disciplinary process. Indeed, the Labour Party said any such suggestion is categorically untrue.
But that doesn't seem to be the case. In an email, Mr Corbyn's Director of Communications, Seamus Milne, asked for a review of the disciplinary process into anti-Semitic complaints. There was a risk, he said, of muddling up political disputes with racism.
How did you interpret that email from Mr Milne?
The same way that all staff in Labour's head office did, which is that this was the leader's office requesting to be involved directly in the disciplinary process.
Our investigation finds that Communications Director Seamus Milne is specifically asked for his
view
by Emily Oldknow, an Executive Director who oversees the disputes team. Milne is also referring to a very specific case. James Schneider worked alongside Milne and has the full email that Matthews referred to in the Panorama programme.
It reads, "This member is a Jewish activist, the son of a Holocaust survivor. If we're more than very occasionally using disciplinary action against Jewish members for anti-Semitism, something's going wrong, and we're muddling up political disputes."
Hey, membership's going through. Good.
With racism. Quite apart from this specific case, I think going forward, we need to review where and how we're drawing the line if we're going to have clear and defensible processes. So, how this is used is just the red bit. So, these 10 words, the great irony is that this is totally correct, and is borne out as being totally correct, because the Labour Party has actually, again and again, disciplined Jewish people disproportionately for anti-Semitism because it has been muddling up political disputes with racism, political disputes within the Jewish community.
The BBC programme only reflects one side of the divide within the Jewish community. It does not speak to supporters of the pro-Corbyn Jewish Voice for Labour group. Instead, it draws on the experiences of young Jewish party members whose affiliation is not identified.
There was a selection of very eloquent interviews, but what the Panorama programme did not withhold from the viewer was the fact that most of these idealistic young people were officials in the anti-Corbyn Jewish Labour movement. That doesn't mean, by the way, that what they were saying was untrue. It simply means that if you're going to assess what they're saying, it's relevant, essential even, that Panorama viewers should be told that, and they won't.
The interviewees include Ella Rose, who's worked for the Israeli embassy in London and led the Jewish Labour movement. Izzy Lenga was JLM's international officer. She tells a remarkable story.
I'm Izzy Lenga. I joined the Labour Party in 2015.
No worries, Eustace. It's all for the algorithm gods. Apparently, if loads of memberships go out, it helps boost the channel and the algorithm. And if you're a channel with loads of memberships, they let you enter an exclusive club where you get to do extra stuff with your memberships as well. So I get, obviously, if I gift myself memberships, obviously I'm paying myself for then YouTube to then pay me out in revenue, which is a 70-30 split in my favour. So I'm essentially only paying 30p per membership to try and boost my own channel and the algorithm. Plus, you guys get to use the lovely emotes. So.
The anti-Semitic abuse I received was what I was subjected to every single day. Telling me Hitler was right, telling me Hitler did not go far enough.
And she came up with this utterly shocking statement, which really emphasised the scale of the, what one could only describe as the immorality and the depravity of Corbyn's Labour Party. But is it really true? I mean, we can check this out.
In 2015, when Lenga was at university, neo-Nazi posters appear on campus saying, "Hitler was right." Lenga is involved in getting them removed and receives online anti-Semitic abuse.
If you read this article in the Daily Mail, and it's also in subsequent reporting, there's no suggestion in it that the Labour Party is involved at all, or the left. It's a strong suggestion in it, actually. It comes from the sort of fascist right.
It's just so far outside the bounds of possibility.
Yeah, there's just no evidence at all. It's literally just like, they must be reading tea leaves at this point.
I mean, have you ever been in any room where if someone says Hitler was right, every day, they're saying it every day, and everyone just doesn't do anything, doesn't say anything, doesn't respond, doesn't say, what? I mean, can you imagine?
It does make you wonder if in the summer of 2019, we'd reached a stage where you could say what's anything you liked about Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. The BBC produced a documentary bearing directly on the character and the fitness for office of the leader of the Labour Party, the leader of Her Majesty's opposition, in a moment of intense constitutional crisis. Now, that's a momentous intervention in British politics. So I do think the BBC have to look really carefully at their record here.
The BBC's reporting prompts critical and alarmist coverage in the British press. It helps establish a consensus that Corbyn has failed to tackle anti-Semitism.
The more alarmist wing of reporting on this issue, it hurts Jewish people because, the idea that Jewish people were afraid of a Corbyn government is true. But why? It's the fact that we're told it's an existential threat by our own papers. We're presented with this image of hordes of virulent anti-Semites. Now, that frightens people. And you can understand why that frightens people, because that is a terrifying image. It's a terrifying vision. It just has nothing to do with the truth whatsoever. And at least some of the people that were propagating it knew it had nothing to do with the truth.
In the spring of 2019, Britain's Equalities and Human Rights Commission, or EHRC, announces it is investigating the Labour Party for anti-Semitism. It's in response to a formal complaint from the Jewish Labour Movement and other organisations. Like Panorama, the Equalities body focuses on the leadership. The Labour files contain a letter from the EHRC to the Labour Party. It lists 14 individuals it wants to investigate. The names include Corbyn and 13 close colleagues and allies.
What is gobsmacking is that not one of the people involved in the disciplinary process prior to the arrival of Jenny Formby as General Secretary is being investigated. This is absolutely baffling.
We have failed Jewish people, our members, our supporters, and the British public.
When the EHRC report is published a year later, it makes no reference at all to McNichol, Matthews, or any other staff members who'd handled anti-Semitism complaints before April 2018. Instead, it condemns the Corbyn leadership for
23 instances of political interference
in the complaints process. This, it says, was
discriminatory and unlawful.
The EHRC report accused the leadership of the Labour Party of interfering in the disciplinary process. The ironic thing is, if you actually read the EHRC report closely, and you have to read it closely because this is not made explicit at all, many of the interventions that were made by Jeremy Corbyn's office were actually to try to speed up processes or to ask why nothing was being done. And actually, the EHRC's legal logic, if you follow it through, becomes quite bizarre.
Time to apologise. Time to apologise.
One of the accusations is that by attempting to speed up Ken Livingstone's case, the leader's office was thereby, in the words of the HRC report, indirectly discriminating against Jewish Labour Party members because the case was being...
Yeah, literally, they could have just said anything, right? When the people who make the jokes and were making the same jokes in chat, their imagination seems like, well, the problem is that we can't like Jeremy Corbyn because he kicked 6 puppies. Like that's how many, like, actually 6 puppies and 6 kittens. And man, would you really want that man leading the country?
Being treated differently. So I think people would be surprised to find out that the way that the case was being treated differently was not that Jeremy Corbyn was trying to protect his friend from accusations of anti-Semitism. Actually, supposedly, the discrimination against Jewish members was that, in this case, the leader's office was intervening to speed up a process.
On the one hand, Corbyn is lacerated for tolerating a culture of anti-Semitism. On the other hand, he's lacerated for interfering to try and deal with the problem. He's damned either way.
Reinstate Mark Wadsworth.
Soon after Formby, Corbyn's ally, takes over as General Secretary, the disciplinary case against Mark Wadsworth is finally heard by the party. Wadsworth had been accused of anti-Semitism by a Jewish Labour MP.
I've been waiting for 2 years for this. It's been torture. It's been agony. I've been hung up to dry. I was put before a 3-day hearing. Didn't stand a chance. I mean, they'd already decided that I was guilty, whatever evidence I put before them. The outcome was that I was expelled, bringing the party into disrepute. They didn't say that I'd been anti-Semitic because they realised that that simply didn't stand up.
Mr. Corbyn, have you had any doubts?
Jeremy Corbyn didn't look after me. He threw me under a bus. They were desperate to get into number 10, to get into number 11.
There were many instances where I did feel quite uncomfortable.
Yeah, literally, and that had happened multiple times. There's been multiple, articles where they've just been like, imagine this fictional world where Jeremy Corbyn is Prime Minister and how terrible everything is. Well, it's fine. We lived through Boris Johnson and Liz Truss now. We know what that world is like. We know what the miserable world is. Unfortunately, they got what they wanted and the country's fucking destroyed.
In terms of how far they were pursuing individuals for anti-Semitism. We were instructed to scour through Facebook pages and social media pages of individuals who we were looking for anti-Semitic material for. The word Palestine was included as a search term, which was the thing that alarmed me the most. We would act almost immediately to any inquiries that would come in from the Jewish Chronicle or Jewish News. Even if it was, at close of play, we would often get instructed by the directors to just stay behind so we can take action on those individuals.
The Labour files reveal that anti-Semitism campaigners are scouring social media accounts for evidence to send to Labour headquarters.
One has to understand that this was a social media crisis, that it involved people trawling through extraordinary numbers of social media accounts to find examples that could be interpreted as anti-Semitism. So what
they just couldn't handle the drip imagination scene. Let's be real, they just could not handle this drip.
we have here is the anti-Semitism cases logs, which logs every single complaint of anti-Semitism made during the Corbyn years and after the Corbyn years. 23% of all complaints in the Corbyn era involved one single individual complainant. 23%. 12% came from the organisation Labour Against Anti-Semitism.
Labour Against Anti-Semitism is a collective of party activists. It regularly makes accusations against Jewish party members. But its spokesman, Ewan Phillips, is not Jewish. The Labour files show that Phillips writes to the party's disputes unit using a pseudonym that appears Jewish.
David Gordstein.
On one occasion, he uses his real name.
Thank you, Ewan.
He hastily corrects himself.
I meant, thank you, David.
Labour Against Anti-Semitism does have a Jewish advisor.
Whether Jeremy Corbyn is an anti-Semite or not, he just has too many anti-Semitic associations, too many terrorist associations to be able to be trusted in Downing Street.
Jonathan Hoffman at one time demonstrated alongside the English Defence League. Now, he's on mainstream TV news.
From Jewish Voice for Labour, and Jonathan Hoffman, who's a consultant to the Labour Against Anti-Semitism group.
This is part 2 Imagination Scene, if you've not seen it. Oh, I absolutely think that. I think it's gonna be so fucked that Keir Starmer will win at the next general election, and then things will be so difficult to fix, and so many hard decisions have to be taken. The Tories can then just hammer them and get back in again, unless they do electoral reform, which is they've decided they're not going to do. Also, thank you, Richard, for pointing out the issues with the sound in my last video. I fixed it now. I'm going to re-upload it. We'll have that segment back up by tomorrow, so people can actually watch it. I wondered why I wasn't doing very well in the algorithm.
Thank you both for joining us.
Absolutely not satisfactory, and the issues between the Jewish community and between Labour and anti-Semitism, which I represent, and the Labour Party will go on after today.
The blog run by Richard Millett becomes the source for a number of stories about Corbyn's alleged anti-Semitism. They include a 2013 incident when Corbyn accused a group of Zionists of lacking a sense of English irony. The Zionists present at the meeting he was describing were Millett, Hoffman, and Sharon Clough.
I am just dumbstruck. These people consorted with known right-wing extremists, with known racists, with Islamophobes. When they have a story about what they perceive to be anti-Semitism, they're taken seriously and at face value by the mainstream media, who don't seem to conduct any kind of research into their
And the thing is, and cancelling them off the back of contravention of the rules that they made before those rules were part of the rule book. It's crazy, some crazy shit. Or even before they were Labour members too. Also, people who are on YouTube, can you let me know of any people who are live and get them to turn on live redirects so I can raid into them?
background or their associates. I'm just amazed at the hypocrisy.
J.K. Rowling apparently did write the pseudonym, of course. Of course he did, Anti-Stripe, yeah.
At Labour headquarters, the pressure over anti-Semitism takes a toll.
There was an individual who I had expelled out of the Labour Party for anti-Semitism, and she was an elderly lady. And she passed away soon after her expulsion, and people were blaming the party's expulsion, leading to her death, as she had a stroke, which led to her death. We had a team meeting, and in the meeting, a senior officer had laughed and said, "Look, we're anti-Semite killers now." And the whole room broke out in laughter. At that stage, I just broke down because, you know, I just didn't know.
I don't even think it's specifically a poison chalice for Labour. I just think it's, we know we're on the way out, so we're going to make off with as much money as we can. Like, did you not see the massive attack tweet where they point out Kwasi Kwarteng's links to a private equity firm, like a hedge fund investment, it was hedge fund manager that he used to work with a few years ago, who explicitly was betting against the pound, and loads of Tory donors have also bet against the pound, right? I don't even think it's something they're doing for electoral reasons. I think they're just scarpering with as much cash as they can before they leave. Although, to be fair, when you look at Kwarteng and Truss, they have history of just supporting libertarianism regardless, because they have this kind of fundamental ideological belief in it. So it might be even simpler than them wanting to make money for their own donors or their own financial interests. They might just be idiots who are just doing it because that they genuinely believe in. I'm not sure. Either way, it's bad.
How to deal with something so horrendous, I blamed myself. Is something that deeply, deeply impacted me, I think.
You should burn in a gas oven, you dirty
Police discovered this answer phone threat has been left by a Jewish man. Jewish supporters of Jeremy Corbyn find themselves in an increasingly hostile environment.
I have had phone calls. I had some phone calls from somebody who said he was outside my door and he knew my home, he knew where I lived, and he was going to put me in a wheelchair, and then that sort of thing.
If anyone who's good is live on YouTube, I don't care who it is, but just can they get them to be live so that I can rate it? Just for any live channel that's good, because I don't follow enough people. I'm not subscribed to enough people who stream on YouTube to know who's going to be live. Actually, if they're airing a premiere at some point soon, that would also work. because you can live redirect, which is essentially raiding on YouTube, to other premieres or lives from other channels, but they have to either have it switched on so that other people can raid into them, any channel, or they have to explicitly allow you to be able to raid into them.
Yeah. I met what to me was utterly cruel nastiness from the local Labour Party. And what was so cruel was that I'd been a member of the Labour Party since I was a young socialist at 15 or something. And I used to love the Labour Party. I had friends here. People turned against me, people I knew. People who my children babysat for their children. They'll say, you know, don't cross over and talk to Jenny Manson. It's Jenny that kind of thing. It's been horrible.
Your opinion has been all over the media. This is my turn to have our opinion.
I'm standing here and I'm entitled to express my view.
Let her have an interview.
Use force.
I'm not using force.
No.
I'm trying to stop you disrupting an interview
No.
so that everyone
I'm
can have their voice
disrupting
heard.
the interview.
This is what happens when you try to raise a different view.
I'm ashamed of you and all those that... Shame on you! 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 Oh, Jeremy's a racist! Oh, Jeremy's a racist!
While pro-Corbyn Jews find themselves shouted down, Palestinian voices are silenced almost entirely. The crisis in the Labour Party in 2018 coincides with the Great March of Return in the Gaza Strip.
A group of unarmed people marched to the barrier that Israel had erected between Gaza and the rest of the country, and demanding that they should return to their homes and lands. The Israelis responded with fire.
I think the "I'm not afraid to be unpopular" line really does belie to me that most of it is ideological, right? And they're just like, it's our vision that this would somehow lead to growth, but not even necessarily growth. The idea that it leads to growth is a lie, but I think they just believe that society is better when everyone's more cutthroat. They're objectivists, right? They believe in the Ayn Rand, greed is good, the world is a better place if everyone just follows their own selfish needs, right? That's their ideological philosophy. So I think we think it will encourage growth bit is the lie, but I think that they're happy to be unpopular to implement their ideological new paradigm.
In 8 months, over 150 Palestinians are killed.
It was inspiring in one way to see this.
Iron Mage, the fact if Forshi's already got his live listed on YouTube, because it's technically the same as a premiere, like when it shows you notifying the live chat is already up for people waiting for the stream to start. That will allow you can raid into a pre-stream in the same way that you could raid into a premiere that would be live in however long. As long as that is up, you can raid into it. Like the Spiffing Brit had his own premiere up like 3 days in advance and raided into it to be able to increase the impressions.
The strength and resilience of the Palestinian people.
But obviously, Vorsh doesn't have me listed as someone who can live redirect, so I can't do that.
But at the same time, it was absolutely devastating. They shot a journalist, Yasser Materja, I remember, with a press vest on. They shot a nurse with her hands up. I mean, these were war crimes being committed. But then at the same time, everything in the Labour Party was a different world. It wasn't talked about. It wasn't put at the forefront. And the headlines were on anti-Semitism. And so I feel like a lot of people, when it came to Palestine, felt like they had to walk on eggshells in order to get the terminology exactly right. People become more and more fearful of speaking up for the Palestinian people because it's easier not to.
Enthusiastic campaigners increasingly focus their efforts on compelling the Labour Party to adopt a new definition of anti-Semitism.
I'd be very clear that only the full adoption of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism is good enough. No ifs, no buts, no caveats.
But you can still say literally everything that Corbyn said about the state of Israel and still not be fall foul of anti-Semitism as is stated in the IHRA definition, right? No point has anybody who's at least prominent within the left of the Labour Party ever said anything that would be in contravention of the IHRA definition, right? There's some smaller members who say things, who make comparisons between the actions of Hitler and the Nazi Party in Germany and the actions of people like Netanyahu and the Likud government in Netanyahu government in Israel, right? There's but no one who's prominent has ever said that. Like, I think those comparisons are crass. But yeah. But also Iron Mage is that you said that it's not a premiere, but you could be abused to YouTube and never implement it. It can be abused, and YouTube implemented it anyway. Because what happens is if you dump a load of people into another person's stream or premiere, loads of viewers, right? If you have like, if you say for example, if you say you are Vorsh and you have 4,000 viewers or whatever, and you dump all of them at once into someone else's premiere or stream, that triggers the YouTube virality alarm in that loads of people are flocking to one thing because it's hot or popular right now. It is viral, and so it massively boosts the impressions in the algorithm, shows it to way more people. So raiding on YouTube into premieres or other live streams is really good for that other creator algorithmically. So you can actually raid your own live streams into your own premieres to boost your own premieres in the algorithm.
Yeah. The NEC has got to adopt the internationally agreed code, lock, stock and barrel.
Palestinians oppose the new definition.
I've not read Britannia Unchained, but I had a friend who's really hot on this stuff. He read it for me, and it basically, from reading it and for looking into libertarian philosophy, he just basically claimed that all like right libertarians are basically all like narcissists, which I think is a funny way of being able to put it, because it's basically true.
The IHRA definition was eagerly taken up by Western governments and Western institutions, and it was blatantly pro-Israeli and therefore anti-Palestinian.
I don't think that's true. And I also think that you can, like, just by saying something is pro-Israeli doesn't necessarily mean it's anti-Palestinian, right? Like, especially if you are someone who believes in a two-state solution. Like, I don't. Like, my particular belief is that there should be one state of whatever you call it in that area, which is not an ethno-state where there's equal rights for all, right? But in the absence of that, and if you do believe in a two-state solution, which is more workable, I guess, in the short term, like, you can be pro-Israel without explicitly being anti-Palestine. So I don't necessarily agree with that.
The controversy around the definition concerns the examples that accompany it.
These are the 11 illustrative examples of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. 7 of them, these in red, refer to Israel. It conflates criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. The 7th one, denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, for instance, by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor, is particularly problematic because by acknowledging the right to self-determination of the Jewish people, you are, by definition, removing the right of self-determination from the Palestinian people.
Not only must we unanimously agree this definition of anti-Semitism, we must take the proper procedures in line to discipline those who undermine them.
The IHRA definition of anti-Semitism is deeply flawed. So the overall impression given by the document is that anti-Semitism includes criticism of Israel or criticism of Zionism. It has embedded this confused definition of anti-Semitism into the public consciousness.
There was a lot of attempts to push back. Truthfully, I think at that time period, there was very minimum success in pushing the Palestinian narrative into the media around this issue. To me, what I remember is there basically being near to none.
No ifs, no buts, IHRA. No ifs, no buts, IHRA. Let's call it out. Let's call it out. Let's call it out.
Labour's ruling National Executive Committee is gathering to discuss whether to adopt the IHRA definition. Outside are familiar pro-Israel activists. They include Sharon Claff, who sympathises with the racist English Defence League. She has asked whether anti-Semitism is being weaponised to attack Corbyn.
That in itself is an anti-Semitic trope, to say that a group of people would use something as serious as race hate to try and undermine a politician.
Inside, the NEC passes the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition, including the examples that link anti-Semitism to criticism of Israel.
We adopted the IHRA because it was politically impossible to hold up why you wouldn't. Day after day on the media, there are Jewish voices who want the IHRA definition. The counter-pressure from Palestinian voices in the media and so on was absent.
I wasn't surprised that it passed. They created a climate where I think many people thought that the only way the attacks would stop is if this definition was passed. But I just wish that Jeremy Corbyn had stood up for what he truly believed in at that time.
Our exit poll is suggesting that there will be a Conservative majority.
The Labour Party suffers one of its worst electoral defeats. Jeremy Corbyn is replaced as Labour leader by Sir Keir Starmer.
It is the honour and the privilege.
Whoa, get his name right, voiceover person. It's Sir Keith Stonger, KC.
Of my life, to be elected as leader of the Labour Party.
The new leader has a very different view of the relationship between Israel and the Palestinians.
Amnesty International recently released a report where they accused Israel of being an apartheid state. That was embraced and supported by many members of your party, particularly on the left. Do you agree with them?
No. I've been very clear about that, and that is not the Labour Party position.
Staff in the party's disputes department feel a change.
I believe the criteria for anti-Semitism changed quite dramatically within Keir's leadership. It was quite clear that anti-Semitism was going to be used as a tool under the new leadership to essentially strike out as many left-wing members as possible.
Many Jews are among those targeted by the new leadership.
At least 56 Jewish people that we know of have at some point during this completely insane period in Labour Party history been either investigated, suspended or actually expelled from the party for something to do with anti-Semitism.
Jewish members of the Labour Party, we've calculated, are 6.3 times more likely to be investigated by the Labour Party for allegations of anti-Semitism than non-Jews in the Labour Party. People who've written about the false allegations of anti-Semitism, people who've written about their experience of their increasing anger with Israel and Palestine. We call that anti-Semites. We're all old. Our parents were Holocaust victims, effectively. My mother escaped a pogrom. How dare they tell us we're anti-Semitic? And how dare they challenge us that we don't know what anti-Semitism is?
Starmer settles a court case with the journalist who presented the BBC Panorama programme and with former Labour Party staff who gave interviews. The Corbyn leadership had described them as
disaffected former officials
with
personal and political axes to grind.
And they walked away with like huge amounts of money, despite the fact that half of this shit was just lies.
We are pleased that our reputations have been restored, although it will take time to repair the damage caused by their unfounded attacks.
The former staff receiving damages include Ben Westerman, the investigator who told the inaccurate story about Rika Bird, and Sam Matthews, who gave the arguably misleading description of the email by Corbyn's communications director. The Labour files include a document that reveals the party settled against the advice of its own lawyers.
We have the legal advice given by the lawyers of the Labour Party. Now, I'm used to seeing legal advice in these circumstances. Normally it's hedged round with sort of caution coming from a lawyer. This is the most unambiguous legal advice I've ever seen.
The legal advice read,
in my opinion, the party is likely to successfully defend these claims. The defamatory meaning identified by the claimants can be shown to be fundamentally flawed.
I've raided into Novara on Twitch, but they didn't say anything. But I have raided into Novara on Twitch, but I'm not sure they would accept on YouTube though.
The advice does not suggest that the party's allegations were true. However, it clearly states that a range of other strong legal defences were available and that most of the claims could be defeated on those grounds. The party's lawyers are also concerned that issues of principle arise in the case of the BBC journalist who is demanding more than $150,000. The legal advice read,
for a reporter who has fronted a highly critical, indeed condemnatory documentary about a political party to receive a six-figure sum in damages would, I think, have an exceptionally chilling and disproportionate effect on free speech.
Starmer ignores the lawyers and pays hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages.
So what was the reason that Mr. Starmer settled? I think he is defining himself against Mr. Corbyn. He wants to renounce Corbyn and all his works, and part of that renunciation is to accept that the case from the BBC whistleblowers was valid and give in to it.
The leaders of Jewish groups that support Israel hold a Zoom call with the Labour Party spokesman on communities and local government, Steve Reed. The plan is to discuss anti-Semitism. But the conversation quickly turns to BDS, the campaign to boycott Israeli goods and divest from the country in order to pressure Israel to end its occupation of Palestinian land. Israel is deeply concerned about BDS, and the British Conservative Party has agreed to introduce legislation making it illegal for public bodies to boycott Israel. The Labour files contain the minutes of the meeting. Amanda Bowman is Vice President of the influential Board of Deputies of British Jews. According to the minutes, she
introduced the topic of BDS legislation. She understands that while Labour might hesitate to support Tories on anti-BDS legislation, she advises that Labour would be unwise to do anything to oppose this.
Bowman went on.
The Board of Deputies are keen to counter suppositions from Labour MPs that because they're nominally committed to combating anti-Semitism, that it gives them carte blanche to say what they like about Israel.
Reid assured her he would
never accept attempts to exceptionalise and delegitimise Israel.
Reading that document and seeing it laid out quite clearly, this mix-up of anti-Semitism, opposing racism towards the Jewish community, and opposing BDS policy in one meeting is quite shocking to see. BDS for Palestinians is a way of pressure.
Like, the BBC, and the thing is, the BBC will just ignore it, right? They'll just say something like, oh, well, Al Jazeera is owned by the Qatari government, so I don't have to care. Well, you're owned by the British government, mate. Like, yeah, quite JDM. The Honourable Sir Lord Keith Harmer Esquire, KC, yeah, absolutely.
Pressuring Israel to comply with international law, to end the illegal occupation of Palestine, and to adhere and give Palestinians equal rights. It shows basically it is not enough to combat anti-Semitism. You have to counter any attempts to show solidarity and effective solidarity with the Palestinian people.
After 6 years of rigorous investigations, the Labour Party found sufficient evidence to open anti-Semitism-related investigations into less than half of 1% of its membership. That figure includes many of the interviewees in this film.
And she was probably expelled off of the back of the false claims that were made.
They have created an incredibly hostile environment for anybody, including any Jew, who is in any way critical of Israel. To be accused of racism, to be accused of anti-Semitism, is frankly terrifying. And most important of all, it has silenced Palestinians, the victims of Israeli apartheid, the victims of occupation, the victims of oppression, and it has silenced those who wish to support them.
I was invited to speak to the constituency.
Yes, they had like the idea of like banning BDS and shit like that. It's absolutely terrifying. But then again, you know, this Conservative government, they just don't care anymore. Although luckily, I think that things with regards to the online safety and harms bill will probably be reversed under Liz Truss because she's too quote unquote libertarian for that.
About Palestine. And I was very glad to do it. Now that constituency, Hackney North, is known to be a left-wing generally pro-Palestinian constituency. So I felt really I was among friends. I remember saying something like, there are two Palestines now. There's Palestine over there, which is obviously the conflict with Israel, occupied territories, etc., and the Palestine over here, which is the one where we are being silenced, where this IHRA definition is being used. That's what I wanted to talk about. Well, I didn't get a chance. The chairperson of the meeting stopped me, just like that, stopped me dead and said, no, we can't go on with this. We can't go on with this. Thank you very much. And I was cut off, just like that. I can't describe the way I felt. It was like a slap in the face. It was like being elbowed out physically of a meeting, the door opening and being thrown out into the corridor. It felt just like that.
Oh, 100%. What's interesting it's interesting looking at the way Lisa Nandy has positioned herself recently as like a left-wing-ish, like riposte to Keir Starmer. Like she's got a couple of good. Apparently, she's got a couple of good policies, like local community ownership is like a thing that she's trying to float. But unless like there's no, it's hardly like the Preston model, it really, isn't it?
There are still those who think there's no problem with anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, that it's all exaggerated or a factional attack. Then, frankly, you are part of the problem too, and you should be.
But we literally have evidence showing that, Keith. We fully know, right, that it was exaggerated for political reasons. Like the scale of the problem, sorry, was exaggerated for political reasons. To be incredibly specific before I get expelled from the party that I'm not even a member of.
Nowhere near the Labour Party either.
Like I said, I think I disagree sensibly. I do think that it is I do think that it is less about. Obviously, there was probably some nature of them just doing things for their donors, but I think that's more implicit, right, rather than something like explicitly designed. I think from when you look at things like Britannia Unchained, people like Kwarteng and Truss, they are just narcissistic pieces of shit with a doomed ideology that will lead to the suffering of all of the poor people. Oh yeah, the excellent response there from Sam Matthews. Well, we have evidence in the Ford report that this exponential volume of complaints was expedited specifically because people were inventing fake cases to be able to bring them there to try and overstate the scale of the problem. We have evidence of that in the Ford report. Apart from that, we literally have evidence that that's not the case, BBC. Like, you can't just not accept the findings of like the report's factual, mate. That's like saying Boris Johnson saying he doesn't accept the the Supreme Court found him guilty of breaking the Constitution. I think it's fine. It's fine to say that the Labour, like instances of Labour anti-Semitism, were awful and that you hated them. The issue is not about whether or not those anti-Semitic incidents exist, because we all agree that they exist. The issue is whether or not its scale is specifically endemic to the Labour Party, which obviously was not. Oh no, of course not. Like, if you watch I've got a really good video out, Imagination Scene, as you probably watched already because you're a YouTube viewer, but the one called Never Trust a British Journalist, specifically about how there's just this ideological groupthink amongst every journalist in the UK, because like over half of them have all been to private school, right? And they just there is an ideological groupthink, right? They may differ on certain key issues, but overall they're all in lockstep with each other. There's very few of them will divert from this overall accepted narrative, this kind of received wisdom of the UK press, that they will refuse to report on things like Trojan Horse or about all this kind of stuff, because again, they would diverge too far away from what the ideology that they have to adhere to even get a job in the journalism industry in the UK in the first place.
In episode 3 of the Labour Files, how Keir Starmer allowed a culture of racism to develop in the Labour Party.
There's a point at which the people involved in this have stopped regarding people of African heritage as human.
They really don't like people who are black, or brown, and on the left.
Well, that was fun. That was good fun. I enjoyed that. With that, I'm going to raid out.